All right. Let's see what we got going on here. Pop up over here. You guys should be able to see me. You guys should be able to hear me. Yeah, so we're going to mess around a little bit with Ansible today. We're going to do the Socratic method to learning. So if anybody wants to do that with me, you can. If you want to just hang out and ask questions, you can. That's what we're doing. So I'm going to have questions up here. I advise if you want to follow along and do this stuff with us that you get a notepad out. I don't care if you use Notepad. Notepad++ is probably my favorite. But something where you can do these things. So I'm working down here. I'm using a tool called Killer Coda. I will link this lab to you guys that want to do it with me over on the Twitch and the YouTube side. And the first lab is installing Ansible, right? So your team has decided they need a tool that they can use to control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. All right, your team has picked an arbitrary tool. That tool is going to do some things, and you're going to try to figure out how to use that tool, right? And I think that there's two really important things to know with any automation tool. I could be over limiting that, and I could be wrong, but I think the two things you need to know how to do is, one, install it, and two, build an inventory for it. Those are like the two most important things to me. So you're going to install it. You're going to get it on there and figure stuff out about it. So in the Debian style of Linux, we're going to use apt. We're going to use the -y so it doesn't ask us about dependencies. And then it's going to say to install Ansible. So if that's in the default packages that we have, right, out on our repositories, if we find that, if our tool finds it, it's going to install it for us, which it does. We knew it was going to, so here we go. But now something that does change over time is the version that comes down to our system. So, we're just pulling this down willy-nilly out on some dev box somewhere in our environment to test. Well, we might accept any version for that. But then when we get ready to productionalize this and make this something that we're going to support in an organization, we have to have the right version of that. We're going to codify that version down and write it into our documents about this is the version we will be using. That feeds a whole bunch of different functions within a company around how we're securing it and if we're updating it. All these things are very important. So you might just think, oh, I'll just install software on servers. Yeah, but that's not really how we do things. Production, it's fine when we're doing labs and when we're messing around with stuff, but when we go to productionalize things, often we think about where this stuff ties into, like, I often say when we do this stuff, we can do it as hobbyists, and that's one thing, but when we get ready to productionalize things, we have to think about it differently. So, Northern Chimp, how's it going? I just wanted to get one more stream in before the end of the year. I went and had lunch with the wife. She's working over at a copy center today. She works for a school district, so sometimes she has other cool jobs that aren't her normal job at the help desk. So now we're doing this lab, and the first thing I say to do is check the version, right? We installed something on the machine, and we can check the version of it. So the version of this is 2.16.3, and that's going to change over time because your system's going out to a trusted repository that is getting newer versions of packages and newer versions of software all throughout it. The dependencies of this might have changed in that. There's all kinds of things that can happen in a repository. So we don't control that, right? This is a thing that I don't control as an engineer. Oh, I'm getting pinged from work. I'm supposed to be off. Hold on. Let me go check my work stuff real quick. I was hoping not to get any pings since I'm technically off of work. But oh yeah, that was just somebody telling me about a password change. So okay, good. All right, and then we pass around our passwords in a key pass file. You don't pass around passwords in plain text, right? That's not how we do things. All right, so anyway, so we've got, here's some stuff here. Here's the Jinja version, which may come up and may be important in that kind of stuff. Schizophrenic finally added a key to get to labs. Have you gotten in there? I haven't checked if anybody was in today, but I saw some questions earlier about if stuff was still up. I don't see anybody in. But it looks like ProLug was in today. So somebody's been in today for sure, at least connected. So, okay. I don't know who's connecting from where and all that kind of stuff. You were able to get in. Nice. Okay, good. Start doing some lab stuff. Actually, I saw, it's funny, two of the labs are down. Two of the lab servers are down, so I'll fix those, but I won't do it on stream right now. Just because I kind of picked the direction of the stream already, that I was going to be doing Ansible today. So we've got an Ansible tool installed. Whatever this tool is, right? Maybe we've heard about it on the interwebs and maybe we've read some stuff about it, but now we want to get this tool to work for us. We want to do some stuff with it. Now, to move forward in this lab, we've got to put that version into a file called root version. So we're going to go ahead and throw that into a file called root version. And then when we hit check, the lab will let us move forward. So now it says Ansible, check the Ansible doc, which is one of these commands that we see here when we were hitting tab earlier. And it says, see how many modules you have. What are the modules that are connected? Read a copy of the modules for setup. So read the documentation for setup and copy. Okay. So we'll read Ansible doc help, and that'll give us a bunch of information about how to run this tool. And then we're going to go and we're just going to run the tool, and that's going to dump a whole bunch to the screen. And then we use the word count -L. There's this, I remember this used to be a different number, but now it's 8354 total modules that are out there. And we're going to throw that into a file called root modules. Okay. And then now we're going to go read some of the documentation. Now, you can just hit this button and it'll read it, it'll drop it on the screen. Or you can also go up and go, okay, S means show a playbook snippet for these plugin types. Okay, so we're use Ansible doc-S setup. And now we can go read about the setup module. This is before we ever run anything or test anything. We're just reading about it, and it says there's setup, there's a fact path, which will let us use a smaller subset of the facts that it'll gather. But setup is going to gather information about servers for us, so that's cool. That's a useful thing to know. It's a useful tool. Now, we have a function inside of Ansible that we can do where we just say gather facts, and it'll go use the setup module for us to get information. There's reasons to use that or not use that, which we won't get into right now, but there are things around that. So we come down here, we can press up and down to go through, we can hit enter to go line by line, spacebar to go page by page, but we come down here and we can read information about how to modify the usage of the setup module. Okay. We can have a timeout for how long it'll spend gathering in case we don't want to go over a certain time. And then we maybe look at the copy module, and this is how we would use Ansible to copy things or generate files. You can actually generate files and put them places with Ansible as well. That's a useful function. But anyway, so here's our copy, and we can again go line by line. We can hit enter and go line by line, and spacebar will go page by page. And there's a whole bunch of options for how we use that tool, right? All right, so we see that, and we say, okay, that's good. Let's go and check, and it says now here, look at you learning Ansible, you solved this challenge. So if you did this challenge with me, all you did was install Ansible and look around at it. Now we go up to our little Socratic learning of Ansible, so learning Ansible through the Socratic method. And for the first lab, I ask you a few questions. Now, if you just did the lab, these answers should come pretty easy. But I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen up, and it says, what is the version of Ansible you're using? Ansible -- version, version, boom. 2.16.3. And I say, why is that important to know? And we talked about that a little bit, but maybe some reasons that's important to know is because I want to know that the stuff that I write is compatible with the version of Ansible that I'm using. And if people are constantly moving versions forward, maybe my stuff doesn't work anymore. That's a thing. Maybe for security teams. Security team is always on us about the versions of tools that we have. That is going to be true in a good company. In fact, I would argue the more put together and more organized your company is, the more you're going to hear stuff about that. So if people are just changing Ansible in your admin environment, that's probably going to get flagged and you're probably going to hear about it. So why is it important to know the version of Ansible you're using? Well, just for what we would call stability, right? Stability around your tools. And I say, what is the version of Python that it's found? Well, it's found Python version 3.12.3. That's the interpreter that it's going to use from user bin Python 3. That's good to know on a system. Because if you go to a bunch of older Linux boxes and their Python interpreter is something different, the behavior that you tested heavily in your environment and maybe your test machines and you thought you had it down, but now you start pushing these playbooks and these modules are pushed over as Python microcode to run in that interpreter, they may behave differently. That's a very well, it's not a very common thing if you have a good controlled structured environment, but it is a common thing if you have what most of us have, which is a Frankenstein's monster of just a mess of different systems that have been built up over the years, right? It's a very common thing to get dropped into. I tell new admins, you think you're just going to go in and everything's going to be the cleanest environment and you're going to like put on white gloves and reach under the table and there won't be any oil or soot down there. I'm telling you, your environments are going to be messy. Kiwi Bites, how's it going? We are just messing around here doing some Ansible. So doing a little Socratic method, right? Asking if we understand things. So what version of Python is found? Why is it important to know? Well, because we see the version that we have, and then if we wanted to verify that, you know, things are the same across multiple systems or something like that, Ansible can also tell us that when we use setup, right? So we can do that kind of stuff. It was chewing gum under the table. Yeah, it can mess you up. Pessa, how's it going? If you guys don't know Michael Pessa, he's one of my mods over on the Twitch side, so it's good to see you. I'm actually just hanging out. I didn't really so I had vacation planned from the 22nd through the 5th, and then I ended up the on-call from Christmas till just a few hours ago, so I didn't take any time. I had like 70 plus hours of like use it or lose it time. That's all gone now. So yeah, I've been good. Pessa, yeah, you're doing good with the baby. I'm sure the wife wants pictures, so if you get any good ones and want to send them to me, I'll share them with her and that kind of stuff. So, but Kiwi Bites, I'm good. Yeah, we're starting the new year. Trying to stay out of trouble. That's always good. Oh, hold on. I don't want that to roll forward. So I have this set on a 3-minute timer. It's going to keep rolling, but I'll stop it. And I'm just saying here then, what is the version of Python found? I just want you guys to see there's a lot of ways to get this information about what's happening in our system. And then what is required argument for the copy module? And the way we would find that is with that Ansible doc-s. And we could say, well, what's a important argument? Well, where you're going to put it is one of the only ones that's actually required. What I mean by that is this. We go here, Ansible doc-s copy, right? So the question was right here for the copy module. You might say, well, wouldn't it also matter where I get it from? Actually, it's funny. The source is not required because we can actually create the file on the fly. But destination is required. Where you're going to put a copied file is very important. But where you get that file from, we can generate it on the fly. So look, follow force, group, local file. Look at all these other ones that are not required. Mode, you don't have to give the mode of the file. It'll just take whatever the permissions of the user is, the UMask by default. Owner, those are all option. Remote source or not, that's optional. But where's the one? Because you might say, isn't the source? Oh, actually, he'd be down here under S, wouldn't he? Should be coming up here. Source is not required, like this, because you can also generate the file on the fly. Okay. So, anyways, you guys can play with that, and we'll get into that a little bit as we kind of go here. Oh, you know what? Let me move. We're gonna move this thing. Hold on, because I just realized that that's gonna be kind of ugly if I don't move that. That's better. And it's a little smaller, but at least you guys can see what you're typing now. Okay. So what is the version of Ansible and why? What is the version of Python and why? It's always like, so we have stability and so security is available to not complain, right? These are the things. What is the required argument for the copy module? The destination, where we're going to put a file. That's always important. Again, you can generate files, you can do whatever. And then I said, then here's just some little challenges for you, right? This is, again, when we talk about the Socratic method, it's almost, people think of it more philosophical, but it's really just you reflect and ask yourself questions. Can I show the version of Ansible? Ansible version. Could I maybe get away with like dpkg? I don't know if this is going to work or not. Could I look at it this way and see the version of Ansible? 2.16.3, there's my Ansible core. Yeah, that'll work too, right? So I can get the information different ways. This is more of an operating system, and this is more the tool telling us, right? But okay, so we can show the version of Ansible. If you were taking notes, you could say, I know how to do that, check. If somebody asks me in a company, Could I validate that I have the right version of Ansible compared to the documentation? I could say, yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah, I would go in, I would check my servers to make sure I had the right version of Ansible across all the execution environments. I don't know. Maybe that's something somebody needs to validate. It's something you would definitely want to validate before you were running stuff everywhere. So that's something to think about. Can you show the documentation for the URI module? Okay, Ansible doc-s URI. Now it's URI, that's not URL, but inside the URI module, there's attributes that I can give as an argument. There's the body format, which I might not know right now, but may be useful for me to at least understand that it's there. The CA path, if there's a certificate authority we're using, any ciphers that we're passing, client, probably a bunch of these things are non-required, but I can look at for what is required. Am I going to follow redirects, like 300s for redirects? Do I force? Do I have force basic auth so that I can use simple auth instead of some kind of certificate auth, right? What are we doing with the system, right? There's all kinds of things that are optional. Do I give certain headers? And sometimes headers are required, like when we pass in tokens and that kind of stuff. We do that in one of the other labs on communicating with like the Vault tool. And that's HashiCorp Vault, IBM Vault now, right? And then a bunch of different stuff. Let's see what's required. What's definitely required is the URL component, because you got to give a URL if you want to use the URI module, right? Where's he at? He's down here. You don't need to give a timeout. You don't necessarily need to give a timeout, but a URL is required. Well, I mean, if you want to connect somewhere with the uniform resource module, you need to be able to tell it where to go connect to. So there you go. A bunch of these other things, not required, but they're there. They're different options. Now, I show people often, you have to know how to use this if you're going to do certain certifications and stuff, because you only have this tool and you need to know how to go read those things. But when I want to go look stuff up, this isn't how I do it right here. I tend to go, like if I'm writing something new, I'd say URI module Ansible. This is how I prefer to look things up, because I can go look at the URI built-in module here, and then I can scroll down and I can see all of those same values. This is basically the same thing that you got with the Ansible doc-s, but there's one advantage right here. They say good writers borrow, great writers steal. That's an old quote. Well, here's an example of just a URI module being used in a certain way to get a get from some example.com, right? And I can just go pull a page down. But then there's more and more built here of examples that I can go grab and go, okay, log into a form-based web page, and I could do that, and I can start to add complexity to my testing and being able to check things out. This kind of stuff becomes very useful when we're I've shown you guys before when in other contexts where we're deploying an environment, but we don't know the variables for the environment, so we go check them out from like a vault, like a HashiCorp vault or something. We get those variables back, and then we hand those variables in and use them to build an environment for a team or whatever. That's a very common way nowadays, where a team can put information into a vault, hit a button to trigger one of my playbooks. My playbook goes and checks those things out, but it's using my team's credentials or my root credentials to go and do the thing. But then they didn't have to send me the information about the environment they want to build. They just go and put in their secure variables. So it's a more modern way to do these kind of things. All right, anyways, I'm getting far ahead of myself. The point is, that is the first one. So we did, can you show documentation for this module? Yeah, so we did all those things. If you just did that first lab with me, you did all of these super simple things. So now let's go to lab 2. If you guys want to follow along, you just drop into these Ansible labs that I have on Killer Coda. They're free. They don't cost you anything. There's like a login through Google Authenticate, like through Google Federated, but it's free. And the second one we're going to do is the Ansible host file. So if you want to hop in, and now we're going to have Ansible already installed, but we're going to play around with the host file. And having a good inventory, being able to build out your inventory, it's probably one of the most important and useful things I could show you guys, right? So we're going to make this a little bigger so you guys can read it. And it says over here, as the environment's setting up, your team has decided they need a tool that they can use to control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. That sounds like how we started. You have been tasked with evaluating Ansible. Okay, so this is the tool I'm going to use. And then now we come down here. I'm going to set it right here. And it says, you know that the inventory is part of the important, is one of the most important parts of systems administration. If I told you nothing else, that would be one of the most important things I could tell you, is that without a good inventory, you can't do administration, you can't do security. You have nothing without a good inventory. That's literally everything about this. So you want to get it right, set up and complete the different inventory challenges in lab. So we're going to create a file called root hosts with our hosts in our network. Now, we have 2 nodes in our network. We have node 01 and control plane. Okay, so we're going to VI root hosts, and we're going to set this up using the INI format. Now, I'm going to give you a place to go read more about this if you want. In fact, in our Ansible automation course, we've been building more and more and reading about these different tools. But you may use INI or YAML format typically, and I say to do it in an INI format. So we're going to say, here's the host group. We're going to say servers is our host group, and control plane is going to be one of the 2 servers we use, as is node 01. Those will be our 2 servers that we connect to. If we cat root hosts, there they are. Okay? This is the host group of the inventory file with the 2 nodes or the 2 endpoints or whatever, however you want to think of them. They're the inventory, right? And I hit check. And then I say, let's make sure that we can hit all of those by doing a simple thing. So we're going to use the ping module and save the output to to a file called root ping check. And we're going to execute the ping module. So we're going to say Ansible servers. That's going to call that host group. And we're going to say -i root hosts to explicitly give the local file in root host. We're using absolute path, but that's fine. That file is going to be our inventory file. By default, Ansible wants to go use etc host Ansible typically, or etc Ansible host, something like that. It doesn't matter, you can override it, which is one of my favorite things to show people too, is like, if you don't know what your inventory file is going to be, you should not execute commands with Ansible. Not if you're the root user, not if you have the power to become the root user. And the reason is this, is because if you don't know what your targets are that you're going to hit, it's almost like you're just firing blindly into the night, and you're going to kill some of these servers off. It's not going to be pretty, because your servers are going to execute things that they shouldn't. You don't know your targets. It's just a bad way to do things. So, and then the module we're going to use for this one is ping. So we'll just go ahead and hit that. We'll give it with no arguments. And it says, I connected to control plane and had a success. Look, here's my interpreter for Python, used in Python 3. And I did a ping pong. And yeah, then I started blasting. That's exactly the right meme. I don't have that meme. I should get that meme. I actually need to get that as one of my little voice things too. But yeah, then I started blasting. That's exactly right. You guys ever see the one where Frank goes to eat his sandwich? He's got his gun in one hand and his sandwich in the other hand. And he like puts the gun in his mouth. And he's like, oh, I meant to... I almost ate my gun. And he's like, Frank. It's from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? So we ran that, and then I want to show you guys this. We're going to throw that into a file just so it drops down in a file like we want. But I want to show you guys something about this module. You may think, okay, I'm hearing ping, which is the packet internetworking groper, which means that we use ICMP, and ICMP validated that the nodes are up. And I would tell you that is exactly incorrect in this case. Ping is typically the packet internet working groper, and it typically uses ICMP, echo request and echo reply to make sure that somebody is available. But that's not what's happening here. This ping is actually doing the full functionality of Ansible. And you say, well, Scott, how do you prove that to me, right? You're making this grand claim and you're saying this thing like you know. And I say, guys, you should test all the things I ever tell you. You should test anything any teacher tells you, right? But I would tell you this. This is how you test it. We go to that ping and we just add 3 V's. Now we're going to be verbose. We're going to have the system show us a bunch of blue of all the things it did. And what I'm going to tell you is what this shows you is the system. Check this out. It does a version up front, so you see the version of Ansible that you're using. That's kind of cool. That's what you saw with Ansible-V right there. It's just in blue now. And then it says, well, I'm going to go ahead and parse out this root host, but I can't do it with these other methods. I had to use the INI format, so that's how we did it. It tells us that it failed the other methods for parsing that file. It tells us some other things it didn't do. And then it says, I'm SSHing over to that machine. Okay, so it's SSHing over to that machine and making sure that it can do some basic little command. Then you're going to see it as you read down here. It's going to SCP, and it may even say, where's it at? There's our SSH, and it goes to both machines, so it's control plane and node 01. Then you're going to see it connect over there, and you're going to see it do a basic little establish, so it's doing both of the nodes, right? And then it comes down here. Make sure that it can execute in Python, right? So it does make sure it's got a Python interpreter. And then you're going to see it do an SCP. SSH. And it says I'm going to, SFTP. So it's going to copy it over a little bit of Python microcode. And it's going to give you its name. And the name will be related to the module that you used. And where's that? You can look through this all you want, but here's the ping module that it copies over. And then after it copies it over, it executes it. That's all it does. And then when it executes it, it shows right here that it's going to try to execute it. And then it says right here, there's the output. So it gives us that within that system. And by the way, we can go take apart what that module is doing, and you'll see that all it does is print out Pong. That's literally all it does inside of the module. But it had to do all of these Ansible things. It had to like build up this whole big scaffolding to do that. And in that scaffolding, we tested that we could get to the server. We tested that we could copy data over there, so there wasn't some like data capacity problem. Execution via the Python microcode. Like it tested all of these things for us with that simple little ping pong. Now all we saw coming to the screen was that it had connected or whatever. I just want to make sure that nobody thinks that that's just like an ICMP. That is not the same thing as this. It's not the same type of ping. This ping is operating just at, can I hit that IP address and get a response? That was SSHing, SFTPing, executing Python code, getting the response back. There was way more stuff going on in that. But I wanted you guys to see you can show that, right? You can validate that kind of stuff. All right. Okay, so then anyways, we hit that. And then we put in their ring. And it says, your team is going to be adding some new servers to the environment that haven't been built yet. So update your inventory file and your root hosts to reflect those new environments. So add all this stuff to the environment, basically. So update the root host file. Use Ansible inventory commands to view the file values. Well, this is where it might be kind of important to go look at these questions real quick. It says right here, what are the file formats you can feed into Ansible? And why is this important to know? Well, over here we can say Ansible inventory, right? And this says how to build your inventory in Ansible. So this is a very important kind of link. And in some of our documentation, especially in the automation course, it makes you walk through this stuff. But how can we build our inventory? There's two ways that it reads right here. You can use an INI format right here, or you can do that same thing in YAML. Those are your two options, INI and YAML. Give it all up and just learn how to prompt. Just told me an ad, but how do I know what to You know, Northern Chimp, it's interesting. There's a fair amount of, you know, I don't want to say shortcut taking. You still have to learn how to think, I still think. You know, as an engineer and longtime college professor, I do think people still need to spend the time to learn how to think. But that's my thoughts on it. So here's the two reasons, or the two ways that we can feed in. And why is this important to know? Well, because you need to know how to use your tool. You need to know how your tool interprets data. So why are the file formats important? Because then I can know how to feed my tool. I can use INI format, which the one I prefer when I write files out, when I programmatically create these. I prefer this, but also you can use YAML. I'm just not good at writing out in a YAML style format. Some of you may excel in that, and that may be a thing that you want to get good at. So there's that. And then I said add VVV to the ping command and see how the output changes. That was what we were just exampling. And then do you understand why you might want to do this? Well, if I want to see where something's breaking, I can get more information that way. Is it not pushing over? Is my code breaking in the execution? That kind of stuff. All right. And then how many file formats can you output to? We're about to learn that. So let's clear this screen up. Let's ls the directory and we'll vi root hosts. You don't have to always be absolute, but I am. And we drop in here and it says to add all these other ones. Now these ones don't exist yet, so they're going to fail. But for us to test them, we can go drop them in the file. So now what's in this inventory file? There's 1, 2, 3 host groups. Then there's a host group that's generated by having these children of these 2 other host groups. So servers and test environment are the host groups that make up the non-prod host group. So its children basically aggregate and get those nodes in it. Watchmakering said, presume there's another option that uses the database. No, actually, those are the only 2 that I know of. Now, let me take that back for a second. You can generate these on the fly with scripts. Ansible does accept dynamic generation, so you can do API calls and generate these on the fly. But I don't really do that much, so I'm not an expert on that in any way. But I know that that's a thing that some people do. For me, I generate these typically every morning from my typically satellite for sure, and then if I have any other sources of truth that I might use, although satellite tends to be my real source of truth, but sometimes I like to use tools like Sharewell or ServiceNow, and I can compare between the different inventories that I have. And I've also shown people, I've shown this group and people in general that you can do that to validate that things aren't changing on one side or the other and that the tools are right. And I do that every morning, and then I can compare my inventories, how they've changed over the course of a month, because I just keep each daily inventory tagged, and then I use that inventory for the day. We can regenerate. I mean, I regenerate them on the fly sometimes, but for the most part, I don't use dynamic like that. I create a static one and then ingest a static one. Yeah, so that's something to think about. But yeah, you can store them different ways. I've always stored them in an INI format. So, cracking my knuckles over here. All right. So I've added these escape::WQ, and we're gonna check to see what our inventory looks like. So I'm gonna run my Ansible inventory against that, and now we've got this other type of output. So it's given us an output when we did just a general list, and this is in a certain file format. By the way, this file format is not in the original 2. This is a different type of file format that some of you might recognize. It's JSON or JSON, whichever way you want to say it. Now, we can also look at it in a graph output. Graph, I don't find super useful. I don't use this one, but some of you might have a parser that uses it. That's up to you. Here's the YAML output of that file. This is what it looks like when you take that file and turn it into YAML. And then you can also see it in, those are the 3. Now, I say which of those would be the most useful to you, and honestly, you just got to look at them and see which one you would prefer to parse the most. But one of the ones that I might argue is very useful for you, even though I mostly use INI format, the reason the YAML one is so interesting to me or so useful is because this one can be pulled out of somebody else's Ansible and dropped directly in yours. So if you had a different Ansible core, or you were going to run it from somewhere else, and you did your Ansible inventory with a list and a -y for YAML, this is the only one of those 3 that is a functional output that can be input directly back into another system. So that's a thing to think about. I said, which of these would you like to see or use in your environment? That's really just going to be, based on what you're used to, what you're okay with, that kind of stuff. All right, so I hit check, and it says, look at you, learning Ansible. You solved this challenge and built an inventory file, used it to connect to servers, and then added additional servers to an environment and viewed them with the Ansible inventory tool. So you did a lot of things there, even if it seems like that was kind of simple. There's a lot of stuff going on in here that's useful. All right. So I said, can you output the inventory in 3 different formats? Yeah. Here's my YAML. Here's my graph, which again, maybe send that to like a project manager or something. And here's just a JSON format. So yes, I can output in multiple different formats. Can you assign variables to your servers in your inventory? We didn't really do that, did we? I didn't mean to pull that up. Shit. Let's pull all this stuff back up. can we pull up all this? Here we go. Okay. Can you assign variables to your servers in your inventory? Yeah, sure. So there's a few ways to do it. Go into our root host. We could go to the end of a line and say maybe type equals, I don't know, distro, and maybe type equals test or something like that, right? And then now those are assigned variables to those servers, and then we could use those. In fact, if we were to output this now in the YAML format, whoops, we would now see that those have, there's other, actually the variables already involved with those, but now we have this distro and test as well up here. We had other ones that had been added here, type client, type server. But it's one of the things that we actually talked about in the automation course. This very quickly can get very unwieldy. This can get very hard to keep track of all the, if you keep doing lines out like that on individual nodes. So typically we can give variables different ways. In fact, there's 22 different ways to give variables into Ansible, which we cover in the automation course. All right. But can you add variables to the inventory? Sure. Yeah, we know how to do that. Just put them right on the command line and drop them in. Okay. Now, the third one is we're going to start going into ad hoc mode. So if you're following along, we did install of Ansible, and then we added into an inventory. And we actually did an ad hoc command here. But now we're going to focus specifically on ad hoc one-off commands. Now, I try to be like upfront about how I use things because, you know, I do this stuff professionally, and JSON wouldn't be portable for going into another instance of Ansible. No, Northern Chimp. That would be accurate. I mean, JSON would be portable for other reasons, but you can't just take it out and drop it right into another machine. It wouldn't work. You'd have to have something else that turns it back into either an INI or a YAML format. So that's the only reason I say that. And if you need to see that, the inventory's right here. These are the only two ways you can feed inventory in, either INI or YAML. Okay, so we drop over here, and here's our new lab. It says your team has decided they need a tool that can control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. Okay, we've determined that's going to be Ansible. So you know that individual modules can be called in ad hoc mode, so you decide to try running some of those against your individual machines. So we are going to verify that we have a host file. I've built all this stuff for you now. We come in here, root host, there it is. So now you don't have to even make that part anymore. And we're going to go check some things about the servers. We're going to verify their uptime. We're going to verify the operating system that they have. We're going to look at their date and time. And we can even look at just like what's all the information that's out there. So let's go ahead and try. We make sure that that file's there. Deliverable, make sure that we have a file with the version from facts gathered from all the servers, and then date from all the servers. So we cat root hosts and see the file. And we're going to check just the uptime of the servers. We're going to do a simple little shell command that goes and hits all the servers with uptime. Now, one of the things I like to contrast for people sometimes is that the way we used to do this, the way I would normally have done this back in the day, would have looked something like this, right? This is the way that we used to do something like this. I might say for server in, and then I would give the name of the servers or an inventory list, which we could also do. But I would say for server in control plane and node 01, right? I would say do SSH to $server, so go into the server and do a host name and then do an uptime. And then I'd say done, right? And it would go, what's wrong with this here? Oh, I didn't close that out. Uptime, done, like that. And it would go and it would hit the two nodes or list of nodes, right? The other way we would do that is like VI, you know, some file, and then control plane node 01. This is the other way. Like if I had a big inventory, and then right here, instead of giving a list right here, I would just, for servers, I would just give something like you know, cat some file, and then now it would just run against the nodes on each line of the file or whatever. And you could do that a bunch of different ways. And the reason this isn't super efficient, or it's not great, is because this one right here becomes very quickly unwieldy. Scott's got to type in everything at the command line, and that's going to be a mess if I have like 30 servers. Even if I dropped it in as a list, it would still be a mess on the command line, so I don't want to do that. And this one's fine, but there's not a lot of control over, like, what if a node hangs? Well, so if a node hangs, I can get around that a little bit with like a timeout, 3 maybe, and then maybe that's fine. So if any node hung, then I would jump over it, and then I would just have to go manually find it. But with Ansible, we have a little more control around what's happening. I mean, we're hitting each of the nodes. If any of the nodes didn't exist, right? I'll just go into hosts here. I'll just change this to like node 2. He doesn't exist, right? And we run our Ansible, and we would have one that didn't come up, and I could very quickly go and resolve him in some way, rerun my Ansible, and see all of my nodes are good, right? So, but this is ad hoc. This is very much like, I tell you guys, one-off commands are very quick, and they're very powerful for like admin stuff, but this isn't repeatable. This isn't like how we do the engineering side of things. This isn't how we build something that will like stand up a whole environment. We don't do that in ad hoc mode. We use ad hoc mode to kind of learn the basics of the system. So we did this command, and this command was a shell. So all it did was make a shell on that environment and see if I could run the uptime command, and that's all we did. Could you run basically any command you want over there that is POSIX compliant and can run inside of a shell? Mostly, yeah. Yeah. But to just think about that for a second, you can absolutely do that. But you will run into a problem later if you rely on shell too much, a problem that people like to argue about up and down the internet called idempotency, right? And idempotency is the idea in mathematics of the numbers in a matrix that don't change when it's multiplied. They're catalysts, if you want to think of them like that. They're numbers that don't change when other numbers do. The reason this is important is when you run the shell command, you are just, Ansible's losing control during the execution of whatever you're kicking off. So a lot of times that ends up being kind of a thing that's like a non-starter for a lot of people. But I argue if you know what you're doing, it's perfectly fine. It's like the idea that we tell kids you can't cross the street. Well, you can't cross the street when you're 5 because you're going to get smashed by something. But once you understand to look both ways, and then look both ways again so nobody gets you, and then you cross the street safely, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly, and it's the same thing with this command. When you understand why non-idempotent commands can run, you can run them, like setup and shells and all that kind of stuff. You can run other commands, but you got to understand what the purpose of them are, right? You got to think about that. So we're not going to get into that right now. We get into that later, but let's look up a setup command. So a setup command is going to go to both nodes and run a tool called factor. It's going to gather a bunch of information about the nodes. Node 02 is still gone. Hey, Fisherman, how's it going? I appreciate the prime.
Happy New Year's.
That is the most cursed image. All right, anyways, let's clean up our host file. We only added that once so we could see the failure. This is going to dump like 16 pages to the screen of just all the things that Ansible knows about each node. It's like 16 pages per node of all the things it knows. So that is what we call so much information. That's what we call noise. When information becomes too much to process, it's noise, right? You guys have probably heard that, or if you haven't, that's a good engineering concept. It's also how we overwhelm sensors, by giving them too much to process. Well, if this command by itself, setup, gives us too much, can we filter it down? And yes, we can. So we're going to filter it down to just the distribution, right? The Ansible distribution of this server is Ubuntu. That's pretty cool. I can know the Ansible distribution of the server. And I say, well, also, what if I'm going to throw that into a file so I have it later. But I say, what if I want to know other information about the distribution? Could I rerun this command right here? And could I put an asterisk on the end of it and get all the other distribution information? The answer is that's yes. So the one command just gave us Ansible distribution, and then we put an asterisk on it and it gives a wildcard expansion, like it's a search. and I can see all this other information about the server. So I might want Ansible distribution major version. If it's 24, use apt by itself. If it's 20 or 22, use apt-get, right? Like this could be a thing that we make a decision on. Any variable we see, we can make a decision on later. I'm not going to show you how to do that now, but we can make those decisions. Daniel said, hey, Scott, hope you're well. I had a lovely Christmas. It was good. Bought the BBOPL a while ago. Thanks for your free update since. Yeah, big book of, that's the labs over there, right? Yeah, I hope that's what that is. Yeah. And I did do some updates. We're all done with updates in the book. But, yeah, but there are quite a bit of updates that have been put into those. So hopefully that's useful to you. We tried to make those as good as we could, I think. All right, so we were talking about all this information that you can get. Like, these tools have a tremendous amount of information, and all of this is like, I kind of think of it as like scaffolding around the problem. In this, we really just wanted the problem of finding the distribution version of the server, which was this one here. But sometimes you need to know, you know, the other pieces of information about the system, so we could do that. And then I say, let's go ahead and look at Ansible date time. This is one of the pieces of information that came out with just the normal setup, but I love this for finding out like exactly the date time of the system. And one of the things that we often talk about is like if you're doing, you know, you have multiple servers all around the country. Some people here work in all of the time zones. I know some of the guys are like cloud people. They work for AWS and they literally have servers all over the globe. Well, if you're ever trying to parse out within your company where your different servers are at and what events are happening on them, and they're in different time zones, you're going to probably have problems. So a lot of big companies will do a setting of the time zone to UTC time. That's Universal Time Clock, right? And that is always set to the exact start of the day for all of planet Earth, right? I think I'm like UTC -7 right now because I'm in Arizona. It might be -6 right now because we didn't change when everybody else moved. But anyway, so here's all these timestamps and time dates and all this kind of stuff. And then we can also go ahead and throw this into a file just so we have it. But the thing I try to tell you guys is if you are doing a lot of, well, if you're a coder for sure, but if you deal with timestamps a lot inside of APIs, you deal with a lot of APIs, you should just get used to this time standard right here, the ISO 8601. This will be the most common thing you interact with for your whole career if you do a lot of API calls. API calls always come back in this standard format right here. But I do not like this. I tell you guys this all the time. I do not like this for stamping files. This is garbage for like a file system. Because right here, this has to be escaped. This is an escapable character, and so is this one. I don't like that. Now I got to start putting backslashes in to run stuff. I don't like it. So I prefer, for file system stamping, this one right here. ISO 8601 basic short. And you might say, why do you want basic short? Well, because then you only go down to the seconds as opposed to down to the milliseconds. That's way too far down for me. I don't need the parts of the second like that. So you said you guys set it to Phoenix because no daylight savings time. It's true, we don't have daylight savings time out here for sure. Phoenix definitely has none. But I can see the time zone of all these servers are UTC, and if I know that when I'm collecting logs from servers, I don't have to adjust or change anything, which is actually really nice. That's an important thing to kind of know. All right, so we've done that, and we hit check, and it says, look at you learning Ansible, you solved this challenge. But now we're going to clear the screen up, and we're going to come and ask ourselves some questions. And I'm going to say, how does ad hoc mode differ from playbook mode? Now, I've only talked about ad hoc mode. I haven't talked about playbook mode, but some of you that know Ansible or have heard of Ansible are probably like, man, this guy's not using playbooks. He's doing ad hoc mode. Fair enough. Ad hoc is how we build into doing playbooks, but ad hoc mode is one-off. You don't get to keep variables between the different ad hoc runs, so variables aren't persistent. In playbook mode, variables stay with Ansible the entirety of the run, so that's important to know. Why would I want to know this? Well, ad hoc mode is quick and dirty, quick checks of stuff, like quick see if the system's up and that kind of stuff. You don't have to write a playbook for all that. Playbooks are how we do a lot of the engineering and builds and repeatability. Like when you guys hear about the cult of Ansible, which I joke around about, but it exists. There are people who swear by it because it can do literally everything for them. Well, that's going to be in playbook mode. When I'm like, hey, I can push a button and deploy a bunch of servers and get them all up to a certain level of configuration, that's in playbook mode. So that's what people are talking about typically. That's where the cult comes from. And I said, what ad hoc commands did you do in this lab? Well, if you do a history real quick, whoops, you see that we did some setup commands and we did some shell commands. So the ad hoc commands that we did were using the module shell and the module setup. And then I said, what useful information is shown by setup? Everything that Ansible knows about a server is shown in setup. And I said, how much you use this information in the enterprise? Well, we can use that filter of time, date time to make sure that all the servers are on the time zone, right? So I can do this right here, and I can say, okay, were all of my nodes on the same time zone? So we need .tz. So, right, are all of my nodes on the same time zone? It doesn't ever work like that, does it? Not in this mode, it doesn't. But Ansible date time and then time zone, we can see that the time zone's UTC, right? And then it says, what is the ISO 8601 timestamp and why might you want to know about this in the enterprise? It's because that's what you're going to do professionally. If you're dealing with servers, if you're dealing with the different RFC type logging codes, you're going to be dealing with that. If you're dealing with API calls, you're going to be dealing with that. Like everything we do professionally deals with that time code, so that's important to know. All right, so that's lab 3. Let's see what these next little challenges. There's like kind of like some little admin challenges with each of these. So can you connect to all the servers and get the uptime? Yeah, I have that command right here. Shell uptime. Boom. Got the uptime of both servers. 46 minutes. This is a pretty new piping hot lab environment that we got here. Then we go to, so we got that. We know that we can connect all the servers and get the uptime. There we go. Can you connect all the servers and get all of their facts? Yeah, that was just fix that command to be setup. And setup is going to dump, again, a tremendous amount of information to the screen about each server. And then here's just information about the server that might be useful to us, right? You can know disk information. You can learn networking information, the mounted file systems, excuse me, and how used they are. You got all kinds of information here. Okay. So we can do that. Can you connect to all the servers and show only the time facts? Yeah, we had that right here. We filtered just on date time, and it gave us all of those date time pieces of information. And we're still in the year 2025, but in 4 hours, or in 3 hours, these servers will be in the new year, right? Because they're on UTC, so they're ahead of me. So could we connect server and show all the time facts? There we go. There. We can carve down into those if we need. All right. So that was one of the ad hoc labs that I've built for you guys to play with. If you've never done any Ansible, that's probably super useful to you. If you have done some Ansible and you're like, oh, I didn't know some of those, hopefully you pick up 1 or 2 things, right? I tell people all the time, if I learn 1 or 2 things when I'm, trying to pick something up or learn something, then that's pretty good. So now let's go over here and let's look at another set of ad hoc commands. So I'll link this to you guys as well. And we're going to do the lab as the lab calls for it. But then we also have these questions up here. And the questions go along with the lab. But this one says, your team has decided they need a tool that they can use to control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. Okay, that's what we've been doing. You've been tasked with evaluating Ansible. Good. Ansible is very important. You decide to practice more of the ad hoc mode and play. You want to deploy a configuration file that you need in your environment. You're just going to test this. You're going to play with the pieces so that when we go into the build soon of playbooks, we understand what the pieces do. That's fine. Again, you're limited in ad hoc mode. You don't have the variables to pass between. You don't have any persistent state, but you can still get a lot done. So here's your lab. Verify your host config. verify your config file. So cat root config file.cfg. Maybe this is a file that you get from a vendor. Maybe this is a file that needs to be set up in an environment for some, one of your teams. Maybe you've got a deployment of some things that goes and looks at this config file for variables about the environment. I don't know, right? Like, there's a bunch of things. And here's some default values in your company for whatever those variables are that we're making up. So just know that these are made up variables. I often think of, if you guys ever saw Going Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield and the economics teacher is teaching him about widgets. He's like, you've got a facility and it's going to be this and this and it's going to be widgets. And he goes, what's a widget? And he goes, it's a fictitious item. And he goes, what do we do with them? And he's like he's getting hung up on the little thing about the widgets that doesn't matter. And the teacher's getting super frustrated. Just suffice it to say, these things don't matter except that they exist and that we can play with them. And the playing with them is the important part, not necessarily what they are. Like var 1, 2, and 3 could be the sizes of the server. Or I don't know. It could be all kinds of things, right? It's just variables that we made up. It's widgets. But again, fantastic movie. Rodney Dangerfield just can't let it go. It's pretty good. All right, so then we're going to push over. So we're going to create a directory on the machines. We're going to use a command, an ad hoc command to do that. Then we're going to push over the config file. Then we're going to realize we had a problem in the config file, or we need to change it for an environment value, and we're going to change one of the values. So we're going to do 3 individual things in Ansible in ad hoc mode that we could then, in future labs, turn into a playbook and do all at once, right? Okay, so everybody's clear. It's like we're playing with individual blocks, and I'm showing you before we build a wall with the Legos. Here's some of these Legos, and here's some of these Legos. We're touching each piece, okay? So if anybody's like, man, this is really going slow. Yeah, well, because not everybody gets it as fast as everybody else, right? Like we go through it all. Sometimes we hit different things. X Shunyum, how's it going? Are you already in the new year? What's the future like? You're probably already over there. I'm not there just yet. I'm a little ways away still. I got another many hours. I don't know, 10 or so. Future's good. It's only 2. Yeah, it's only 2, and I'm in Arizona too. I'm in Phoenix, so yeah, it's only 2 here. We got a party. The wife's making me go to one of her coworkers' parties tonight. Starts at 7:30. I told her we're gonna be out of there by 9:30. We're not staying the whole freaking night. But we're gonna go see one of her friends. I think so. It's funny. I knew the guy. I worked with him 20 something years ago, but I don't remember him. Like, I don't remember anybody. But I'm the worst, guys. I'm literally the worst. All right. So we look at our files. Cat config. We've got some values. Let's see what we can do with these values. Well, the first one is we can run we're going to create a directory on each server named opt deployment, and let's run this command and then let's take it apart. So we see what happens when we run a command on a server. Here's just an ad hoc command, and we know the Ansible command because we played with that. It's going to call this tool Ansible. We're going to go against the server's host group inside of the inventory file root host. So here's servers, which is comprised, of these 2 servers. Now, for the first time, if you haven't done this before, for the first time now you're seeing the file module. I haven't done that yet. I had done a setup and I had done a copy, and I think we had even done ping one, right? We did ping, so we've done those. Now we're adding file to it. So now you've got some experience with this new one, and now we're going to give some arguments to it, right? And those arguments are the path, which is opt deployment. That's the directory we wanted to make. And the state could be a bunch of different things, but the state we chose to give it is a directory. Now, you say, well, how would I know what states there are? Well, we could do an Ansible-doc-s file and get the information about that way, like we had done. Or we can go over here and say Ansible file module, and we can go find that over here too. So there's a Ansible built-in file module. And we go down here and we say, okay, oh, here's the things we can do. Within the state, we give it a string, and that string can be absent directory, file, hard, link, or touch. Right? Well, we wanted a directory, so our option was a directory. State is a directory. So we made a directory. That's all we did. Okay. Now look at all these other things that it did. It said, well, you didn't give me any of these other things, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the defaults. So the group ID of root is group ID 0. The mode is going to be coming from the UMask, which is 0755. We can modify that if we want. But here's our path, op directory, op deployment, and the state's a directory. Okay. Now this is why people love Ansible so much. I'm going to press up and I'm going to rerun this. You see all that as it is. The second time we run the file module to create a state directory path op deployment, it already exists. So Ansible goes, nothing to change. Nothing to change. I'm just going to, we're good. But if I had that there and I said mode is equal to 0750, so now I'm going to change that mode, it'll modify that directory for me. And in that modification, it'll say changed, something changed, true. Now I'm going to run that again, and guess what? It's all going to be set right, so guess what we're going to get? We're going to get that green again. I didn't have to change anything. And then I'm going to say, you know what? No, 0755 was right. That's the way it should have been. It'll change the one time, and then it'll validate it the next time. And this is very, very important. This changed right here. It's not important yet, but it will be in playbooks. If changed is false, then we don't notify handlers. And handlers are things that only happen if changed is true in a play or a task. So it starts to, later on, it starts to become really, really powerful because I can restart a service, but only if a file changed. And that starts to be like this really kind of useful and functional thing for us, right? Like that's, when we talk about the cult of Ansible and why everybody loves this tool so much, that's the thing that describes, that's a big part of what describes what's called idempotency. If I push over a file to 30 web servers, but it only had to push to 2 of them, and then the handler was only notified to restart the service if the file changed, 28 of my web servers would not be restarted on their service. They would just be running, and the 2 that had to change the file would get the kick over. We do that later. Don't get me wrong. We're going to do that later in labs. You're going to see that happen. But I would just want to show you, this is like a little small play version of that changed or not changed. It's the fact that the modules are testing things before it does changes. All right. So we've made a file, or we made a directory. We've pushed over a file. Have we pushed over the file yet? No, we haven't. Let's push over the file. We're going to use that copy command, and we're going to copy it over. The first time, you're going to see yellow, of course, because you're pushing the file. And then let's push the file again. And the file doesn't have to be pushed again. And look, it checksums the file. That is a SHA-1 sum. Should be a SHA-1 sum. We can validate that, by the way, so I'm not lying to you. One sum on config, right? And there it is. Yeah, so that's a SHA-1 sum. SHA-1 has been deprecated from like normal use, but it's perfectly fine for weighing 2 things. It's a lightweight version of the different SHA. The bigger you get, 256, 512, 1024, the bigger you get with your SHA sums, the more cost there is to it. But that kind of makes sense, right? The more work you do on a system, the more you're going to get. Okay. Anyways, we can prove that there. If that file changes in some way and I go to push it, the SHA sums will be different, and we will push the new file, and then that'll go back to being yellow again, right? Or whatever that is. Okay, green and yellow, I think. Okay, so now we've got a configuration in there that we want to fix. Let's say that for some reason this value of zeros, we needed to be straight, just all ones. So we're going to use the line and file config. And the line and file config is going to change var1 from all those zeros to var1 with a bunch of ones. So if I were to cat opt deployment config file now, I would see that 1111 in there. And if I were to run this again, I would see that it's already done, so it doesn't need to make the change again. So it's interesting. And then we can validate real quick by running a shell command against the nodes just to see that it's like that. Boom. So That's not the only way to do it for sure. There's other ways to do it. We can start adding templates in here in a little bit. We can, there's other ways to do what I'm showing you here. We could have the config file be built and then pushed over. We do all kinds of things. This is just a static config file, and then we're modifying one little piece. Now, that's what it looks like to do it in ad hoc mode. We hit check. It says, look at you solving this challenge. And I say, what command did we use to create a file on the server? Can you set a different owner and permissions on that directory? And I say, I think I can do that. Here's the file module. And here's the group and the owner, right? And I say, yeah, I think I could do that. I come back over here and I go to this module from where I push the file, the directory originally here. And now instead of doing mode, I could leave mode at 755 and I can say owner is equal to Ubuntu and group is equal to Ubuntu. Because right now we know that it's root, but we're going to change it to Ubuntu. And then now you see that it was changed, and you run it again, and now it doesn't have to change, so it's set. And then if I ls-l on opt directory deployment, then I would see that it is owned. Let's see. Is that the right spot? Did on these servers, root host, opt deployment, state directory. 0755. Oh, it would help if I did an ls-ld. And then we see that it's owned by Ubuntu now. And then if I went back to it and I change this back to root and root like it was, right? That's going to change it. Second time it doesn't need to change it. You don't have to do it twice. I'm just showing you guys. And then we go look at it and it's back to the root owner. Okay. We see how it works. Xshiny said, what's the plan on weekend Linux intensive? I'm going to do all the automation stuff this weekend, so that'll be good. And then I did record us hanging out this last week. Or actually, I didn't get a recording of it, but I did I did write the notes out. So for our little meeting this last week, I did write the notes. I didn't do a recording of it though. We didn't have very many people. I think there was only like 6 people total, and like 4 of us were the senior guys. So it was just us kind of hanging around the fire, watching and talking to each other. So, what command did we use to create? Okay, we did that. What happens when you run any of those commands a second time? We see it in green, and we see that nothing needed to change. We see that changed false, which is very important for later. What regex value is in the line in the file module? What is it looking for? So I'm going to clear the screen, cat root config, and then I say, what is this regex looking for right here? Well, the regex is looking for anchored to the start of a line variable 1. So it's going to come down, it's going to find var1 here. Then it wouldn't have found var2 because that's not var1 anchored at the front of the line, and it wouldn't find that either. So, all right, so then that's the regex line. And then what command might you use to test for the same kernel versions on all these servers? So that's a little bit of a challenge. What command might I use to make sure that all my servers are on the same kernel version? Anybody think of a way that they would do that? How would you do that in a Linux box? What do you guys got? How might we check that? I can think of 2 ways to do it. You could say Ansible servers -i root hosts. Oops. You also use just hosts if you're local in an environment. You can also set the config file to use a specific config. You might say, like, Scott, you seem really like you do a lot of like you're very like verbose at the command line. And yeah, sometimes I am, because I've seen people just do stupid mistakes that greatly affect the system in a way that is non-trivial to fix. And I'm talking like tens, if not hundreds of hours to fix. And that's a problem when all the hundreds of hours are going to come from me. Like, it's going to take me a week to get this environment back right. That sucks. That sucks when you have to rebuild an environment because of a mistake that could have been fixed by just being verbose at the command line. So if you ever see me do stuff like that and you go, why does he do that? Well, it's because I'd rather be slow than just like, I mean, it's like the same thing with like people that refuse to use like a little wood push block in a wood shop or something. It's like, well, why are you missing? Why are you stubby? Why do you have multiple fingers missing? Well, because I always do it the fast way and just push it by hand. And you're like, all right, I guess so. I guess if that's the way you want to do, you don't have a little push block to just save your fingers one day. And there's all kinds of knots and wood. There's all kinds of things that can happen when you're doing woodworking, right? All right. So, anyways, how might you test the kernel? This is two ways I can think of it. Shell -m shell -a uname -r. That's one way. Just check the kernel. That would tell me if I had the same kernel. Another one. You could also do setup, and then -a can be filter, and then Ansible kernel. Right, that'll give you the kernel version as well, but that's using the setup, and then that'll give you the kernel. So, I mean, how do you want to see it, right? And then you might say, well, Scott, I want to prepare a report with like 1,000 nodes, so I don't really want either of those. And I go, well, fine. Then we would use a Jinja template. We're going to get into that part next. Uname-r will give you, Uname-r will give you just the individual, just the kernel information, the version number, without having to get all the other noise too. So we'll get the next part of this. All right, so could we do all that? And then the next one's going to be, we're going to stage some files. So we have done, so just now, if we were to think back to the last hour and 13 minutes, we've done 4 labs. We've answered a bunch of questions as we did the labs to, again, like, I mean, I'm not grading you guys on this. This is for your own little challenge to yourselves. And what we're doing then is saying, can we do these admin type tasks that Ansible would do for us? The first 4 labs have been installing Ansible, building an inventory, and then these 2, so now 4 total. These last 2 have been just ad hoc commands, just throwing commands, seeing them come back, all this kind of stuff. Rossberger, how's it going? I was hanging out in your stream most of the day, Rossberger. If you guys don't know, Ross is one of these guys who he does a kind of variety of streaming on different stuff. And used to always do all Dead by Daylight, but now he's doing some Ark. And I was talking to my brother yesterday, who my brother does a lot more gaming than me. He's a little bit younger. And he, not much younger, he's in his 40s, but, well, he's exactly 40, in fact. But he, my brother did, he told me he played it for a little bit, but it kind of got into like a lot of people just camping stuff, so he doesn't really play it much anymore. I think he mostly plays, what's that game that everybody plays with the, oh god, these shooters. It's like the most popular shooter. It's the one with all the stupid dance stuff. I don't know, anyways. But yeah, Rossberger's always around. You must have gotten done early if you're off right now. I'm hanging out. I went, Ross, I was hanging out with you on your stream, and then I jumped at Fortnite. That's exactly it. That's what my brother was playing last night. But I was hanging out with the wife. We did, we got a place out here called Barrows in Phoenix. It's real good, like a Italian pizza. You're sick as hell? Yeah. Well, I know your back's been hurting you too. I was supposed to go wrestle today, but it was going to be at 10, and I'm like, I don't want to go at 10. I want to go at like 5 in the morning and just be done for the day. So I skipped out of it, but I'll go tomorrow morning at 10. But I had lunch with the wife, and then I just started streaming now. So Ross, you and everybody else that's here, we're going through, this is a set of tooling that allows us to control a bunch of servers. In fact, it comes from the old book. If you guys ever read the book Ender's Game or saw the movie, Ender uses the tool called the Ansible to control ships at a distance. That's exactly, if you guys recall, and look, earmuffs if you don't want spoilers. If you guys have never seen Ender's Game or read the book that's 30 years old now, because I read it in high school, if you guys don't want the spoiler, earmuffs now. Ender is playing the game for real against the aliens. He doesn't know it. Nobody else knows it in the book. But at the end, you find out he was playing with real human lives. And they were really dying when he was doing stuff. But he won because Ender never lost. That was the point of Ender. He never lost. He was a brilliant guy. He was a brilliant kid. Where I'm going with that, though, is the Ansible is the tool that he uses to control systems at a distance. And that's where they got this name from. Now, It is attributed to Orson Scott Card for the people that originally wrote Ansible, but he has given attribution to a woman from the 70s. I forget her name. She's like a very prolific author. I just never remember her name, so I apologize for anybody. But if you're wondering, Ansible's name does come from Orson Scott Card's version of that from Ender's Game. Anyways, unless you're using kernel that's patched in memory, I'll let kernel care. Oh God, I wouldn't even, Daniel, I would never. I've seen some stuff where we can patch kernels live, but I've never used that professionally. I always just build them and then go. So, yeah, Rossberger, hopefully you're feeling all right. Hopefully if you're done, you're kicking off for the day and getting away from the computer. I'm going to do this for a few more hours, and then me and the wife are going to a party at like 7:30, and I'm going to get out of there at like 9:30. I'm not staying all the way until New Year's. No way I'm staying. I'm 44. I'm not staying up till New Year's. No way. No. I saw a nice thing today that said the only reason I would go to New Year's is to make sure that this year leaves, and I was like, that's actually kind of a funny reason. But okay, so we asked ourselves all these questions. This is what the Socratic method is. If you guys have never heard of the Socratic method, it's, can I do this thing? Yes, I can. And when we're fixing systems, like when you want to get good and you want to have a good name around being like a fast sysadmin and systems engineer, it's the idea that I can get to a solution, I can drive down to something quickly. So a lot of what we're doing here is learning how to use our tools, guys. Yeah, X-Shunya, I appreciate you coming by. Yeah. It'll probably be Dr. Scott next year, not Dr. Scott this year. Well, not 2026, but probably early 2027 I'll finish up the doctorate. Actually, I'll probably defend my dissertation in 2026. But yeah, anyways, that's neither here nor there. Let's go into this next lab. Guys, the labs are free. If you want to do them with me, you can. I'm going to drop down into lab 5. Which is now going to start to pull this all together into a playbook. So we've done everything ad hoc, we've done everything one-off, and now we're going to do it all together. So here's the lab for Twitch and YouTube. If you guys want to do it, you can. Server patching for many, many weeks, circa Heartbleed and Shell Shock. Yeah, watchmakering, I was around for Heartbleed and Shell Shock for sure. Yeah, I did that. I was at a smaller company, but yeah, I had to do it on about 80 machines or so. We had probably about 80. So I had a big high-performance compute environment, but I was blocked off from everything via air gap. But then there's, yep. I remember Heartbleed and Shell Shock. That was a fun time. Okay, so let's get into, I'll make this a little bigger so you guys can read it. And then I say, your team has decided they need a tool that they can use to control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. Sure. We're pretending with just 2 servers, but I tell you guys all the time, if you can get 2 servers to work, you can hit all the servers. So you have been tasked with evaluating Ansible. That's going to be our tool. Ansible comes from the old word answerable. That's what it meant, was to be able to control things. You've done enough with the ad hoc and one-off commands. We've done all that. We feel good about that from our other labs. You've decided to put them into a playbook now to deploy a deployment tar.gz, so that's a tarred up compressed file, to all your test servers. That's all we're going to do. We're going to just push it over there. So we're going to verify our host file. It's the same host file we've been using, so we've got all that. Then we're going to go, and here's a thing. We can copy in the deployment if we don't want to write it by hand. And then we're going to get a SHA-1 sum of that deploy.tar.gz. We're going to need that in case that's modified or changed in any way. And now we're going to VI our deployer. So here's our YAML for our playbook, which our playbook is root deploy.yaml. You can use YML or YAML. Nobody's going to come to your house and like drag you out for using the wrong one. Just make sure you use whichever one is correct for the lab. Otherwise, you got to write the command out yourself. Here's our deployer playbook. The 3 lines at the top denote that we're starting a YAML file. YAML just means a type of file, right? Or YAML is just a type of file format, right? Here we have a dash that says name start of our deployer playbook. So we've started to write our deployer playbook. Cool. The hosts we're going to hit are the servers. That is the inventory, the host group of our root host file. Oops. There we go. There's servers. Control plane and node 01. Let's go look at our deploy.yaml. And here's the whole file. So there's our servers. We have no special variables to give. We do want to gather facts, so we're going to do a setup against the servers and get all this information. Become is false because we're already root, so it doesn't matter. That could be true or false there. And then here's our first task, and our task has a name, and it says copy deploy.tar.gz over at, and it's going to give in a variable the time when it happens. That's what's going to happen on the command line. The source is going to be our root deploy.tar.gz, and the destination of where we put it is going to be opt deploy.tar.gz. Fair enough. There's a checksum that's going to come with it, and that checksum is going to validate that this is exactly the deployer we originally expected. That's all it's going to do. So we can run it. Test it by running it. So run it. It's going to push that over to that other environment. And it did it on both nodes right there. And if we were to run it again, it would not need to copy it the second time, so we would just see that in green. Because it's going to be green. Good. Didn't need to do anything. It's been pushed. And then we could validate it with an ad hoc command. So ad hoc's super useful. We can just run it on both nodes and see that yeah, that file's been pushed. Okay. Yet another markup language. Yeah. Watchmakering, it actually, so Ansible, YAML can mean a few things. So that is one of them though, for sure. Yet another markup language. It can also stand for YAML ain't a markup language. I've seen people like drag out fights about it. But I think really somebody probably just needs to go and look at the mailing list, and the answer should be in the mailing list. But yeah, people argue about what it stands for though. YAML ain't a markup language. YAML, what, I don't know. All right. So we deployed that, and then we're going to move forward a little bit. And the next part of this is going to say, okay, that's all we had to do for this first lab. But I said for lab 5, why might we want the checksum file before we stage it? This one's actually maybe non-intuitive for some people. Some of you might say, well, I just want to check that the file's the same as when I first built it. And I would say that is a valid reason. That is probably, like, if we were doing like Family Feud, that's probably like 91% of the time, sure. But the reason I want to know, and this comes from just, man, this one has bitten me so many times over the years, is sometimes you've got a file out there or an ISO or a, I don't know what it could be, but for me it's typically been like a tar.gz like this. And it's something that my team manages. So my Linux platform engineering team runs this file. And somebody in my team goes, oh, well, I'll put a new version of, some like Java in there because we went to a newer version of Java. Everybody's using it. I'll just drop it in that file and it'll be good. And then everybody that pulls that file from now on will just get that. Well, that sounds really wonderful. And, you got too many cooks in the kitchen, so it starts to cause problems. But for me, I want to know that file that I'm pulling and stamping to a server or deploying in some way has changed. I don't care if it's for the good. Because what I want to do is I want to go take that and test that before that rolls forward into some production environment. So, yeah, when I do something like this, that checksum is there to make sure that nothing's changed in my environment. The thing that I pushed 7 weeks ago and pushed a button and deployed a server, if you come 7 weeks later and push that button again to make a new server, it will still have all the old stuff from 7 weeks ago, but in a working format. Because if we push everything forward and patch it in this and this and this, but then somebody runs some old version of their code to test something and it just breaks all over the place, what was the point? Right? That's not, you say, but we're secure. Well, yeah, we're secure to the point that nothing works. It would be, there's other things that we do for security in that kind of context, but just know that when we checksum a file before we stage it, the reason we do it is so that everything continues to work, right? It said, what were the arguments you gave to the copy module? And what checksum is used by default in Ansible? Well, I said earlier that the... excuse me. Checksum is by default using SHA-1. And we can prove that by saying SHA-1 sum root deploy.tar.gz. And that is the same value right there as the checksum. So the SHA-1 sum is what's being used. And then I said, what were the arguments you gave to the copy module? The arguments we gave were the source, where we were getting it from, and the destination, where we were putting it. Remember I said source isn't a required, because you can also do contents and make a file on the fly. But here's the destination that is a required one. Checksum is also not required, but it is something that we wanted to use for ourselves. And it says, what happens if you ran a playbook for a second time? Well, it's perfectly safe. It should just run again, because it doesn't have to push over there again. And when it doesn't have to push over there again, it should just say, we're good. Everything should be green. Everything's okay. Nothing had to change. Okay. What if I removed it on one server, though? What if I did an rm-rf on opt deploy.tar.gz here, and I reran it? I would only expect it to have to change on one server because it's not found there. That would look like that. If I removed it on both servers, it would. So that would look like this. If we removed it on both servers, if we just did, instead of ls-l here, we did an rm-rf, we could delete it in both places, right? And then now we would expect this to have to redeploy to both of those. There you go. But if we ran it again, we don't expect it to deploy, so this should just be green. So what's happening here is like I was saying, like yet another made up Lexami. Yeah. Yeah, Fisherman. Sometimes Rosberg will stop by after he gets done with other stuff. Maybe he said he was sick, but I know his back's been hurting him the last few weeks too. That's one of the things, like I consider myself very blessed. I was an infantry guy, and I've wrestled for the last, 22 years or however long I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now. Almost 23 years now, actually. And I don't have, like, major back problems or hip or leg or knee problems or anything, which most infantry guys have those by the time they're 22. I do have a bouncy ball chair, yeah. Yeah, I have a chair that's, it keeps me... I feel like this chair keeps me pretty active, actually, because I do kind of lean on my desks more, but like I definitely have to stay up and like hold myself up, Fisherman. But I told the wife, like, I've heard people switch to a chair like this and they're immediately sore for like weeks. And I'm like, I'm a wrestler. Like, I didn't feel this in my core at all. Like, I can feel that my core is tight, but like, I wasn't ever sore from it because like, this is nothing compared to wrestling practice, But anyways, let's see. Okay, so what happened when you ran the playbook for a second time? Didn't have to change anything, so it didn't do anything. And what might we want to know about Ansible behavior, about checksums? Like, why might we want to know? Well, because it's useful to know how Ansible is going to behave if we make a change and if it's going to push the file or not, right? And that's a thing to know. Like Ansible, if it doesn't have a right checksum, it's not going to push that file. It's going to say you're trying to use the wrong file. It's going to give you errors and stuff, and we want that. So that's actually the old Ranger webcam, but now that faces down. Over here to my left, I have a, I actually have a, how did I know that I had arrived? I always tell people, how did I know I arrived as an engineer? When I had upstairs in my office my own little, it's like a 168 drink holder, like it's a fridge. But on top of that is my wife's little sand art thing, and it just sits there and draws sand art. That's all it does. I can make it bigger if you guys want to see it. It's just, it's zoomed in a little bit, so it's kind of grainy. If I make it bigger, it won't. Well, I'll make it bigger for a second. So what it does is it wipes. So it's wiped the screen, and now it's drawing something. I don't know what it's drawing, though. But we sit here and watch it draw if we want. Yeah, so this is actually, it's actually just a zoomed in version of Ranger Cam. Because Ranger passed, so we don't really have a good Ranger. I'll make it a little bigger for you guys. There you go. So we can keep talking about stuff, but then you guys can see that. So now if we take stock of what we did, we've installed Ansible, we've run through inventories, we've done 2 labs of the ad hoc mode, and now we've set up the basics of staging a file with a playbook, but we haven't really done anything with the playbook. So let's go to the next lab, which is really just a continuation of this 5th lab, but it does everything. So I'm gonna show this lab for people that want to do it with me. Here's the link. You thought it was AI Halai? That's actually funny, because somebody did post that just in our Discord maybe even like a day ago. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. All right, let's make this a little bigger. And for people that want this, by the way, if you guys want this PowerPoint as like notes, it's up in the Discord in the presentations channel. But I would highly advise, if anybody's watching this with us and doing this with us, get a notepad out. Write out the things that you do and don't understand through these different labs. And maybe you find that Ansible's a thing that, I mean, I really do think if you get into, like, systems administration is good, right? Like, systems administration is fine, good work. But you learn how to automate some of this stuff and you get a little bit of power behind it. And you really can be valuable to a company. And then you can start to move up into, like, the engineering roles and some of these other things that really start to make, I think, pretty good money, right? Engineers make very good money as far as that goes, right? All right, so anyway, so your team has decided they need a tool that they can use to control and operate the many servers you have in your environment. Doesn't that sound like every lab? You have been tasked with evaluating Ansible. You are adding to your original deploy file and want to execute the installers on all systems. So you're going to install this tool on all systems. Make sure that the playbook runs to completion and sets the environment as you need it. So this playbook is going to take a clean environment and do something to it, right? Now, this is just going to be us pretending to install an actual application, but in later labs, we're going to deploy web servers. We're going to deploy environments inside of web servers. We're going to set up NFS. We're going to do all these different things with Ansible later, but we got to do the simple thing first. So there's that. YouTuber said, careful, you wake up and find out that you've become a programmer. Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's go look at all of our different pieces. If you get stuck in this lab, all the answers are right here in this file. I like to just pull it over so I can show it to you guys. And then let's check our root host file is there. Good. And then let's go into our deployer. This is the same deployer we did earlier. Everything from there is before. So we'll vi root deploy.yaml. And here's our start of deployer. This right here is from the last lab. In fact, there's nothing in here that we shouldn't understand or at least feel like, okay, I get what's going on there. Okay. Now we scroll down a little bit, and now we're going to do something a little different. We're going to create a directory for us to untar that file into, and we're going to do opt my app, and we're going to give the state directory. Now, some of you are going to go, hey, that's that file module that we did last 2 labs ago, and we were doing it ad hoc. Now we're doing it in a playbook in a task. And I say, yes, you're very astute. They're the exact same thing. Earlier, we were doing, you know, Ansible servers -i root hosts -m file and then -a, and we were giving the argument path equals and state equals. But now, since we're doing it in YAML, it's a little different. The format's a little different. The way we feed that information in, it's kind of like it's like a little baby and you've got like a little spoon and you're like feeding it. And sometimes you got to go like this and like fly like an airplane, and sometimes they just want it because it's applesauce and it's sweet or something like that. I don't know. But the point is, this is how we feed Ansible the same exact module, but not in the ad hoc mode. Now we're in playbook mode, so we give it as individual. This is what's called a task right here. We name the task. We didn't have to do that in ad hoc mode. But now we've got file, path, state. Boom. Then we go to untar, and we're going to use the unarchive module. This is a new module. We haven't used this before with us here, right? I haven't talked about the unarchive module. And now we're going to take this source, opt deploy tar.gz, and we're going to go to opt my app. Okay. Then we're going to say name, make the installer script executable. And inside of there, we're going to use the file module to take this opt my app deploy deployer.sh, which was just put in there as a regular file, which was not executable, and we're going to change it to 0755 so anybody can execute it. Then we're going to use a shell script to run it. Now, we don't normally use shell, but if we understand why, we can. So we use the shell script to run it, and we register the output of that to a variable. Then we debug that variable to the screen so we can see all the tasty data about what happened in our system. And that's it. What other things could we do here? Later on, we're going to take these registered variables and we're going to feed them out with Jinja templates so that we know information about the system. There's all kinds of things we're going to do later. We can make decisions based on whether this passed or failed. All kinds of things we can do later. But for now, this is the start of a deployer to a system. Sorry. What am I missing over here? What'd you say? People should be aware that Ansible isn't the only thing that, yeah, there's all kinds of things that'll do this. It does have one of the coolest names, fair enough, especially if you've read Orson Scott Card's books. Let's see, Dan said, apologies for jumping ahead, but the issue with Ansible is that Red Hat have effectively killed AWX Ansible Automation Platform. It's crazy expensive. Yeah, so it's Ansible Automation Platform you're not going to do unless you're in a company. AWX is difficult to run and work with. But I'll tell you, I've run, even in my current role, I have two, so for my NOAA project, I have two 2,600 node systems, one in Phoenix, Arizona, and one in Manassas, Virginia. You can go find out what they are by looking at the NOAA page. But I have these two big systems. They're about 24 to, depending on how you count them, 24 to 2,600 nodes. It's probably closer to 2,600 if you add all the side nodes to it. But they sit in both locations, and I maintain both of them with Ansible Core. I don't do anything with Ansible Automation Platform or Tower or any of that. Tower doesn't exist anymore, but I've used all of those tools for nodes, and you know, it depends what you're doing with it. If it's just me and just me doing admin work, I don't need Tower. It's when I want to extend the functionality of my Ansible to the other teams that Tower really shines, or Ansible Automation Platform now. But yeah, Ansible itself is a fantastic tool. Yeah, there's other tools that exist out there. I mean, look, we can nod Chef, we can nod Puppet, we can nod Salt. All of those exist. Shell, I was showing you guys earlier, I can do, truth be told, there's very few things with Ansible that I can't do with a shell script. That being said, when I want to feed things out and get really nice reports and clean it up and send it to other people, Ansible is absolutely the king. Ansible is like when you see somebody working on the side of buildings and they have this nice scaffolding all over around the side of it and stuff. And like me doing stuff with shell is like me hanging off the side of the building by myself, like swinging around with just like a cable or something. Like, oh yeah, sure, I'm getting work done, but I can't pass this stuff off to anybody else because it's me like a madman with shell scripts and loops and stuff, and it's not super repeatable, and I have to edit stuff on the fly. Ansible, however, just it makes this nice scaffolding that is so just functional to work with, and it's really easy to pass on to other people. Like I take all my Ansible playbooks and I wave goodbye from a company, and everybody else can just maintain them. You know, it's kind of a nice thing. All right. So anyways, let's see where we at. We've got all of these pieces. We touched everything. We talked about all the things that are going to happen. So let's go watch what happens. Escape : Q. I don't have to change any of that. We could write all those out if we wanted to, but I don't think we necessarily have to. And let's push the playbook to see if it builds everything the way that we expect it to. So it's going to go to the nodes. It's not going to see the files there, so it's going to have to do each of these things. It's going to make the script installer executable. It's going to run the installer via shell script, and then it's going to debug out what happened when the shell installer started. Now that shell script only does a couple of things. We can cat the file if you want to see it, but it basically just echoes something to the screen, waits 5 seconds, then echoes something else. In fact, you look at the playbook, we can see how long the playbook took to run, which was 5 seconds right here. That's the delta between, delta in engineering is always the change between the start time and the end time. The delta was about 5 seconds. And it says right here, I would be deploying some stuff, I would be deploying some more stuff. If we were really writing a deployer or really using one, it might actually do some stuff there. It might actually take some time too, so we might want to know. Very important to us is that the return code was 0, meaning that it was a good, there's no failure, right? Return code 0 always means there's nothing else to do, no errors. And then we come down here and we say 7 things were okay, changed were 5. Now I want to show you guys something. We're going to rerun the playbook, and I want you to think, if everything's been done, how many things have to be done again? Let's rerun it and see the answer to that question, because it's kind of tricky. Those things don't have to happen because they're already there. We had to re-untar the deployer. We had to make the installer script executable again. And then this one, the run the installer, which is a shell command, right? You guys saw that it was a shell command, shell module. That one will always be changed. This one will never be green, no matter how many times you run this playbook. And that becomes really important when people talk about idempotency, because a shell command is always just firing a cannon off into the night. You can't unfire a cannon. You can't keep track in the night where it went. right? So when Ansible runs a shell script, it loses control of the program execution until it gets a return code back. And then that return is either good or bad, but it doesn't know what happened for these 5 seconds. It only gets what's reported back. So what I mean by that is if this ran again, does it change the system more or less? Ansible doesn't know, so Ansible has to say it's changed. It's firing a cannon off into the night. It's walking down the deck of a ship and putting a fire to a cannon and lighting cannons off as you fire them off into the night. So in some ways, like people will tell you, I will never, ever, ever use the shell command. Fair enough. If you'll never use it in one of your playbooks for your deployers, that's a really mature model to get to. Me, I still use it. I still especially use it when I'm checking stuff. So, all right, and then we can manually verify for all the hosts, so we can just go see if it's there. Yep, it's there. And then I get to here and I say, look at you solving this challenge for Ansible. And let's go see if we can do, what are our answers here? How did this lab build on the previous one? So I'm going to clear the screen up. And I'm going to go look at this and I'm going to say, okay, this is what we originally did. We pushed a file over, made sure it hadn't changed. Okay. Then we made a file, a directory on that server. So that's something that's been added. It's not something that's been added to our knowledge per se, because we did that in like lab 4, but with ad hoc commands. So we've created a directory before. We just maybe hadn't done it this way. Right? If you had started with 0 Ansible before you started doing this with me, now you've at least created a directory out there. Now we're going to unarchive it into that directory, unarchive this file. Then we're going to make the installer script executable. So we're going to say this is opt myapp deployer deployer.sh 0755, and it wasn't executable before. I think it was like 0640 or 0644. So it wasn't executable. Now it is. Then we're going to execute it for fun. We're going to gather the value of what comes out of that back, and then we're going to debug it to the screen. So we did all these added things that we hadn't seen before, but really not that new, because it's, we're just making a playbook. All right. Escape :Q, get out of there. And why did we have to make the installer script executable? Because it wasn't executable originally. And so that's why we had to do that. Why should we not use the shell module in the enterprise? Well, we shouldn't use it because it will always trigger and it will always show as changed. However, if you know that, it's perfectly acceptable. If you understand the risks of it, you can use it however you want. But just understand that it's never going to be, like if you have that changed, triggered to a handler, that handler is always going to run as well. So it always restarts a web server, or it always restarts some service on this machine. It's always going to do that because the shell module is always going to trigger as changed. Always, every time. What information comes out from the debug of the shell command? What is the RC and what is standard out? So let me just show you here. If we just cat, let's cat that real quick. And then let's cat out opt myapp deploy deployer.sh. That's what that thing does. And if I were to run it, let's run this thing real quick. That's what it's going to do. And when it's done running, it's going to give us a return code of 0, right? And when we run that, we can, by the way, we can, if we really wanted to, we could run it outside of there in an ad hoc mode. But let's just run the whole thing again real quick. Oops, that's a shell. Wrong one. Let's run this real quick. I want to see that thing run, and I want to see its values. And I say, what is the RC? What is the return code? What does that mean in computer science? Okay. Return code 0 means no errors. It means good. It means successful implementation, successful run, whatever you want to think of it. And then what is standard out right here? And why might we use standard out? Well, maybe I want to read the logging. Maybe I want to read the message. Maybe I want to search for some output in standard out. And then here's standard out lines, where instead of being the raw format, because standard out is just raw, standard output lines reads the new line characters and gives it to you like it was an actually output to the screen. Because this is how it output to the screen when we ran it manually, right? Look right here. because that's how it's read with new line characters. That's the difference there between standard output lines and standard output. There was no error or standard error lines, but it would have done the same thing. So you can see that as well if it was going to have errors. All right, so there's your Ansible deployer. All right, so question is, could you write a playbook that pushes a file to servers? I think you could. And if you want to test it, go ahead and feel free to practice it. But it would probably start like this. And it would probably just be a basic little copy like this. It'd basically just be this start right here. Could you push something to both servers? And honestly, you don't even need the checksum on it. So you pull that off, and then you can do that. So that's a good little challenge for you. And then can you write a playbook that executes a command on all servers and stores it as a variable? So that's another one, and that's part of down here. So can you debug a variable in a playbook? That's the same thing from right here. Can you debug a variable in a playbook, but only at level 2 verbosity? So I'm going to say, and then 7 goes into Ginger. So I'm going to leave this here, right? And I'm going to clear this screen up. I'm going to take this on studio mode. Let me put this here, and I'm going to pull up my hourglass. I'm going to say quick break. And we're going to do some more Ansible. So I'm going to take an 8-minute break. And then and I'm going to say your challenge, so try that challenge. And then we'll try it when I get back. We'll see if we can do it. All right? I'll make that a little bigger while we're waiting. So you guys can watch that too. Oops, where's that? I got to go to my other screen. There you go. Boom. You guys can watch that thing draw. All right, I'll be back. I'm going to walk it out a little bit, drink some water. time looking like here? I only got a minute. All right. I'm gonna go down and get a monster. I'll wait. I'll wait. I'll wait. Let's turn my camera back on. All right. Not allowed to squish these on stream anymore. The guys don't like it. All right, let's get this out of here. And then, question was, can you debug a variable in a playbook, but only at a certain level of verbosity? So this would have required you to go look at something. So let's, real quick. Let's put this to test.yaml. Go right here, get rid of everything, and let's go right here, and we're going to say, could we do each of these things? Can you write a playbook that pushes a file to all servers? Okay, well, let's try real quick. Let's say push cron tab. I don't know, cron tab. Oh, what's going on? Maybe I'm having a stroke. But let's copy, and the source. Let's go 2N. The source will be etc cron tab from this machine, and the destination will be temp cron tab for all the machines, let's say. Okay, now we can aim small, miss small, so we could just test this real quick. Oops, what's going on here? So we can just run Ansible playbook -i root host, so the host file in here, and then go against test.yaml. Can that push etc cron tab to both nodes? Looks like it worked. So if I just cat temp cron tab, it's there. And if I were to like diff etc cron tab and temp cron tab, they should be the same file. Yeah, we check some. We do all kinds of other stuff. But that was the first thing. Could we push the file, some generic file, to all the machines? Yes. Can you write a playbook that executes a command on all servers and stores it as a variable? I think I could do that. So then I just go down here, right? So this is us just practicing, guys. That's all we're doing. Hey, Tani, how's it going? If you guys don't know, Tani's been around a long time in the community.
We spend all this time catting files, but we never dog them.
That's true. We do spend a lot of time catting files. Run some command. Gather. We just gather output. It's arbitrary. It's whatever you want. And we're going to say shell. Now, shell doesn't require the argument to be on a different line. You could just do it right over here with the shell command. And our shell command for this, just for fun, can be uptime. And then we're gonna, it says right here, and store that variable. So we're gonna register uptime. So now we've got a variable. Ansible's gonna have a variable like in its SAC. Oh, you know what? Let me make that small again. Hold on. It's drawing. It takes a little break and then it keeps drawing. So if some of you like sand art, that's my wife's little sand art thing. It's over here. It's just like, it's just drawing all the time. That's all it does. And it actually has a nice little kind of like background hum to the screen too. Okay. Now this uptime, this shell and uptime has no relation to this command, but we can still just run them together, right? There's no rule against it. So let's just escape :WQ, run. Because again, aim small, miss small. Just run it. See our system work. Okay. Now, we know that it's got a variable. Ansible stuck the variable in its SAC, but we don't have any proof that the variable's doing anything. So let's do something with that variable. Let's say debug the uptime variable. Now, some of you are probably noticing that the names that we give the command tasks, the individual tasks, are coming out on the playbook lines. So they're useful for us for when we go drop it into our change management logs, or when we're dropping it into our tickets after we do a bunch of work. You know, we write a playbook and it does work on a bunch of servers. Then we take all the output and just dump it right in the log and go to sleep for the night. It's like, you know, you do this on like a Saturday night and it's like, okay, my change window opens 11, get everybody on, get my bridge call going. I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. I want to do all my servers and get done and fucking go to sleep. Or go, you know, when you're younger, go party or whatever. I don't want my change window to take the whole night. So, but change windows are almost always some type of late hours and these kind of things. I've tested it extensively, but now I want to get it in. So now we're going to debug this variable, whatever this value is. We're going to bring it out to the screen. So we're going to use the debug module, and the debug module is going to take a var, and the var is going to be uptime. Okay, and again, aim small, miss small. Let's run it. Let's. Right? One test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. I could tell you all day I wrote it right, but it doesn't matter. Oh, here we go. So now it gives us all that same output that we saw before. So we updated, we've gotten the thing. We've gotten all the information. Can you debug a variable in a playbook? Yes. Can I debug exactly one variable? Like I only want the return code? Uptime.rc. Let's test it, right? Sit around and argue all day. Let's test it once. I got just the return code. That's what I wanted. Cool. Now, this last thing is, can you debug a variable but only at a level 2 verbosity? Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I can go read the Ansible docs on it. Or I can come over here and I can say debug Ansible module, right? Debug Ansible module. Drop into the Ansible built-in debug. And I come down here and I go, they've got some little example. Oh, verbosity 2. Verbosity 2, what does that do? And I come over here and I just add that in as an argument to my module, just like this. Verbosity 2, right? And then now I say, well, can I run my playbook and not see the debug? No debug, it's skipped. Can I add 2 verbosity, which by the way is going to blow the screen up with a bunch of blue, but it won't skip now. Didn't skip at that time. It ran it. It also gave more other stuff that we don't really care about, but the debug happened because we were at a verbosity of 2. So it was quiet other times. This is very useful for if you're going to give playbooks to other teams to use and you don't want them to see your debugs, but you don't want to be pulling debugs out and putting them in and pulling them out, putting them in. Just leave them at a verbosity 2 and only you'll ever see them if you're kicking them off through pipelines and other tools and stuff. So it's kind of nice. Tani, hopefully everything's going good for you. Yeah, hopefully this stuff's useful to you guys that are watching this. So yeah, can you debug a variable at a playbook but only with a level 2 verbosity? Yes. And how did I know to do it? I went over to the Ansible documentation and I learned how to do it, and then I could always just write it that way in the future if I wanted to. Right? And I would highly advise, like ever since I found out about that, that's how all my debugs work now. Because when I'm running it, I can just ignore the other noise. I just want to see my variables are coming out. And then I can forget that they exist in there because nobody else ever runs my playbooks with the verbosity because they all run it through a pipeline. They don't even know how they run it. They just hit a button and it runs, right? So they don't even know. It's irrelevant to them. It's all magic to them, to the users or the different engineering teams. It's all just that. Okay. So now we're going to jump out of this lab. We've done 6 labs. So if any of you guys have been hanging out and doing this with me for the last 2 hours, we've done 6 different Ansible labs. They're all free. They're all on Killer Coda. You can do !labs over on the Twitch side, and it'll give you labs. YouTube side, I don't really have anything like that set up. I guess I do actually have that set up when I have the streamer bot running, but I think my system's rebooted and I didn't turn streamer bot back on. So, all right, so let's do some Jinja stuff. Get into Jinja. We'll take a minute, and we'll do some Jinja. Anybody got any questions about this? Anybody got any things that they like or dislike about this type of tools? I mean, again, your options in this space are we can do it all by hand. You could probably write a significant amount of Python and do some of this stuff. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of stuff other people can't maintain or run. I really do think Ansible's got a lot of useful, kind of valuable stuff. And then I got to play with the CIQ tool called Ascender, which is kind of their version of AWX. I need to play with that, but I haven't gotten around to playing with that tool yet. So, what happened? Something about Nix and NixOS. Yeah, my problem with Nix and NixOS, I don't really have a problem with it. It's just, I think they're fine. The problem I have for people that want to use it is it's not gonna. There's no. I don't know of any companies using it. Like if you put NixOS on a resume, it's just a different OS to people. You know, that's my thought. Zorgel said, "What is Jinja and its history?" So I don't know all the history of Jinja, but I can tell you Jinja is very Python-esque, and we can use Python filters to affect data inside of Jinja. I can show you some of that here in a minute. But Jinja, to me, the way I use Jinja, and there's probably a whole bunch of other uses that I don't use. It's a templating language, but I use it like a Madlib, or if any of you guys remember Adlibs, where your friends would just give you, you know, an adjective, a noun, a verb, this and this and this, and then you would come up with a silly story. That's really just how I think of these. You can filter down and do all kinds of things. I'm going to show you guys how to do some flow control with them, and that's about the extent that I use them, because I don't really need to go super deep into Jinja for most of the stuff that I do. But I'll show you kind of that. But Zorgel, I don't know a lot of the history of it and how it came about and how it was picked. I just know that it's all Python-esque under the hood, and it uses a thing called Python filters. So let's do the lab though. So we'll go hop out of here, and let's go to the first Jinja templating. So I essentially do two things with the Jinja tool. I either stamp files out to servers, which I'm going to show you guys how to do, or I pull reports out of my runs. So I either look at each individual server and stamp files, or I holistically look at the whole run and pull it back, which will be the next lab. So you've been using Ansible and decided to work with the templating tool that comes with it. You're going to use Jinja 2 to stamp when activities and deployments happen on your servers. Okay. So when we run our deployer, maybe from earlier, we're going to now stamp out a file that says this is when it was deployed to the server. Okay? So your team wants to also verify that certain conditions exist when the deployments occur. You figure out how to use Jinja 2 for that task. So they want to know, like, when we deployed on a server, it was this version of a kernel, or it was this version of the operating system, so that if in later, you know, somebody's updated the kernel or the version of the operating system and our tool doesn't work anymore, we can at least say, well, it was deployed on this version and the things changed and maybe testing wasn't done, or the model is that we strip it out and redeploy it. That may be a thing we do in our company. That's a very common thing, that we don't just have a version that moves with each version. Often we'll say, okay, yeah, we build something to the kernel, so we strip it all out and build it for the new kernel. That's a way we do it in high performance compute. So anyway, so let's verify our host file, and we'll create a Jinja 2 template file and then stamp each of the files. So let's cat our root host file. It's there. And we'll copy in the files that we have. And let's go look at them real quick before we run them. Here's our solution. And the first file is our template.yaml. And it says here that all this thing does, it starts with the 3 dashes to denote the start of a YAML file. Gives our dash name, start of Jinja 2 template push. It's going to go against servers, which is the host group of the inventory file. Nothing here is changed from any of our other labs. And now we're going to use this template module with a source of root template.j2, which is a Jinja, and a destination of root template.txt. So it'll be in the same directory, but it'll be a .txt file. Okay. Let's go look at our template.j2 file now. And this is all it is. It says this is an auto-generated file by Ansible at, put in some variable. That variable is Ansible underscore date underscore time dot date. And then Ansible underscore date underscore time dot time. So it should give us the date and time that this happened. It should give the host name, the system OS family, which is Ansible OS family, and then the number of processors when this happened. Okay. So let's test it, right? Let's see if this works when we build this file out. So we run it. Now in our directory, we should see the original template. Let's clear the screen. Here's our template.j2. That's the template. And here's the template.txt, the file that was actually pushed to the server. So this is an auto-generated file by Ansible at this date and time. That looks accurate. We could do a date and check it. Host name is control plane. The system is Debian. Number of processors is 1. Okay. That's good. That is that may be useful for us, right? Then you might say, well, what other information is out there that we could want to stamp to the machine? Well, we can always on our system say Ansible servers. So now we're using Ansible playbook in an ad hoc mode. We could just run setup and see everything that we could possibly want. Any one of these variables by name we can use. So, I don't know, let's say you wanted to know the Ansible Python version when this thing was deployed. There's the Ansible Python version stamped right now. Let's say you wanted to know, I don't know, the type of processor. Maybe somebody was going to, I don't know, changing processors is very uncommon, but maybe. Maybe you want to know how many processors there were, which we already have that actually. We have processor count, right? Maybe you wanted to know the underlying version of the system, which is RHEL 9.6. That's the underlying virtualization piece. That might be useful. What if you wanted to know? And literally, you can use any one of these. None of this is super useful or different. But one that's very important is maybe the version of the kernel. I think we also have the kernel version already. Do we have the kernel version? We don't have the kernel version, but maybe we want the kernel version. What is that going to look like? It's literally going to look like this. We're going to VI that template. We're going to say kernel. I had it in the paste buffer, so I should be able to right click and paste. It's going to have to run, so it's going to have to modify that file when it runs. So we're going to see it modify it. And then in this case, we can just bang cat if we did it. No, we only catted the other file. There it is. Now we see the kernel version. And again, that kernel version might be important because maybe we build something. Shopify allegedly uses NixOS. Yeah, Northern Chimp, I can see use cases for it. I definitely don't see anything wrong with NixOS. I just haven't seen it professionally yet. I could see, I had heard somebody probably a few months ago said we're using it in our dev environment. And I said, well, that's cool. Let me know when it rolls forward. And I hadn't heard back yet. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think that's where a lot of companies have been trying to go to. Like even Red Hat, I don't know, 6 years ago, Red Hat told us you shouldn't log into a server ever again in production. And we're like, oh, that seems kind of a bit wild. But their idea is we pipeline everything. This is how OpenShift works too. You pipeline everything up into the production and nothing's ever touched in prod. You only, diagnose logs and rebuild, right? Modify and fix and all that kind of stuff. But that's a hard level of maturity to get to for a lot of organizations because a lot of stuff that goes into it. But CrackerOps.io said, what's my opinion on AI decreasing Linux, the need for Linux roles? I don't see that yet, for not in any roles that I work with. I have a lot of college students that are trying to get into the industry and working on this stuff. I have a lot of people in Prolog trying to get into the industry and doing stuff. And I'm telling people, like, don't get discouraged by AI stuff, because I think a person still needs to make a decision on a lot of this stuff. And because I explain it like this. I've had the ability to do failover and fail back between servers now for over 20 years, right? Like in the industry, I've been able to fail over and fail back when a system is good. And you say, well, so couldn't a system always have checked itself and then called itself good and then brought the system back up? Yeah, we've had that ability in systems for over 20 years. We still have a computer doesn't do that call, because sometimes there's other things that are taken into consideration. Sometimes there's other knowledge coming in. And honestly, for me, it's just like, you're gonna see that, like, we want to hold off a few hours because of this, and I think a person's always gonna have to make that call. I really do. But I mean, I'm not seeing the AI taking people's jobs yet like that. So, well, and also AI will require Linux skills to administer. Yeah, that's true. The servers themselves are going to require that. Northern Chimp said GitHub, AD, Nix companies, curated list of companies that use Nix. So that's, I mean, if they're hiring for people, I don't know. I haven't seen. I mean, I can go look at it, I guess, but I haven't. So, if the question is, have I seen that? I haven't seen it. But I mean, I would maybe tell you, if you want to put it above RHEL on your resume, feel free to. But I still think RHEL, that's Red Hat Enterprise Linux RHEL. I still think RHEL is going to be the bigger thing to put on a resume. That's my thoughts on that. But okay, so it says right here we're time stamping. Why might we want to know what we're stamping? Wait, what is this? Why are we stamping, or what are we stamping? Well, we want to know these things because we want to know the name of the server, the kernel, the version, and the number of processors. That may be useful for us to troubleshoot later. What arguments did we give the template module? We only gave it the start, the source, and the destination. We only gave it the source and the destination. Those were the two arguments. Said, can you capture the kernel value and stamp it to all the servers? We did that. I didn't even know that was a thing that we were going to do because I haven't read this in so long. And then can you add the Ansible datetime.tz variable to your Jinja 2 template? Did it work? Yeah, I think we could do that. So I come down here and I can just add it. I can just add it right here to this line. Over here. Put at the end of everything. I can just say there you go. Ansible datetime.tz. Push the file. It should run. And then if we cat that file out or look at the file, then we would see that the time zone was UTC. Now we can validate all of those times again with that command from earlier, which is a ad hoc command, but it's right here. In the setup command, now that's going to dump too much to the screen, so we'll do setup and then we'll give it an A filter equals Ansible date time, and now this will give us all the date time values, and then we'll have the day. So we had date, Ansible date time, time, and then we added TZ, which was that UTC. So all of those values should be found there. Date, time, TZ. Those are all values right there. Okay. Can cancel eternal? Did you work when you re-put? Yeah, it's all there. Okay, there we go. Make files that give you makeup. Yeah. That's funny. All right. Can you create a file on each node with 3 variables from gather facts? Yeah, I mean, we could grab any of these values, right? We could just make a whole bunch of them if we wanted to. So that's kind of the challenge. If we wanted to write a challenge for this, it could be as simple as this, right? Just clear this up. Whoops. Clear ls, and then maybe we copy template.yaml over to test.yaml, YML or YAML, doesn't matter. Test.yaml will go, and we will start with like a test.j2. Let's call this test, and this can be test.text that we're going to copy over to. Okay. and then we'll just vi a test.j2. And in this file, we'll do just some really simple things. And it said, could we just grab 3 variables? And I mean, technically, we could just say time. We could just steal the ones from the other one. Time equals whatever. Or we could do something else. In fact, we could even come here and we could say Ansible. Let's go with Ansible template module. Gives us some gem to it's very basic. Look, it's very basic. But we could say let's give it some Ansible special variables. So Ansible special variables. There's some special variables in Ansible that I always show people. These are very powerful to know these. So look up your special variables, and maybe I want to know some of the things that are all kind of there. So maybe I want to say Ansible play hosts all. This is a list of all the hosts that were targets in the play. So maybe over here I say hosts, and I say Ansible play hosts all, right? And then maybe I just run this real quick. And let's just see if it works. Did it break? Did it crap everywhere? I don't know. And then ls, and we cat our test.text. And there's our 2 nodes. And then there's another one that we could use, and we can say finished hosts maybe, and that can be, this is just Ansible play hosts. We're going to run that again real quick. While that runs, you know it's going to run. We come over here and we look. What's the difference between Ansible play hosts all? That's a list of all the hosts that were targeted by the play. And Ansible play hosts is a list of the hosts in the current run not limited by the serial, and failed or unreachable hosts are excluded from this list. And I go, why might this be valuable? I come back over here. I look at my test. Okay, they're the same. Let's change our host file. Let's make a file that doesn't exist. Node 02 and node 03. We'll just make 2 hosts that don't exist. Let's rerun our playbook. We started out with 4 supposedly on the starting line, even though some of them failed, or we knew they weren't going to be there. And then now we've got this list that's stamped on these servers. This isn't how I would use this, but I'm showing you because, again, we're testing. Now I have all these hosts, but the finished hosts are the ones that actually made it to the end. This is not the way I would want to look at this. We have a different way of doing this. I do a different type of report for this. But I'm showing you that there's these variables that exist. There's special variables that Ansible always has in its SAC about what's going on. I could know what tags were being run. I could know the groups that existed. I could know, there's all kinds of things here. I could know the inventory file. Inventory file that Scott used when he ran this playbook to deploy this was this. Somebody later says that wasn't the right host file, and I go, well, this was the host file that was in the change. And at least then I would have some evidence of what I did, right? And I tell you guys all the time, being a good engineer doesn't have to be combative. It's just saying what it is. Like, I don't have to be combative. This is what the system sees that I did. You know, Playhost deprecated, but same as Ansible. I've never even used that. There's a whole bunch of these I've never used. Never even used. But these are variables that are always in the SAC that Ansible can always pull out and do something with. And maybe they're useful to you. Maybe you need to know the limit. Maybe you need to know the number of forks. I don't know why I've ever needed to know the number of forks I had available in a playbook by the play. I don't know. But maybe you do. Config file would probably be useful sometimes, because then I know what server and where it went from. So. Okay. So I did all that to show you guys that, yeah, you can grab variables from different places and you can run them, and then you can stamp them down into a file. And you could put literally any variable, the special variables, the variables that you gathered from setup. So all of these setup variables, anything where we had all of these variables, you can put any one, you put any one of those in there. Don't worry about those 2 failures. But all of these variables, any one of these, you need to know the Ansible mounts and which servers inside of Ansible mounts, what the different mount points are. There they are. So what are all the mounted file systems? You can know them right there, and their type. Right? Although we would have to unwrap this, which we're going to do in the next one. So, can you create a file on each node with 3 variables from each? There you go. All right, Jinja reports. Okay. So that was that was a quick one. Let's hit check, and the next part of this I think says, oh, my validation failed because did I not? Oh, it's because I have. I don't know why that would have failed. I gotta go see. Template.txt. Definitely there. Get rid of these. Just to make sure. Yeah, I think it's because I've mucked around in that file. Looks at you learning Ansible, you solve templates. So you figured out all these things that you needed to do for a Jinja template to work. Why we stamp the files, what arguments we can give to the template module, and where, most importantly, if you can't find that, or if you don't know that information, you can go find that information because it's all out there. Right? It's all out there in the world for you to pick up. All right, let's do this next lab. Again, labs are free. You guys can do them with me. We're going to go to. So that was a playbook to deploy the Jinja template and push a stamp to each machine. Now this one is going to be, this is one of the most useful things I've figured out how to do in my career. This is probably, I don't know, probably like conservatively, this is probably like 70% of like the usefulness I get out of Ansible is with what I'm about to show you guys right here. So we're going, I mean, I use Ansible for a lot of things, but the reporting that I get back from Ansible is super useful. So this lab says you've been using Ansible and decided to work with the templating tool that comes with it. So that's Jinja. You're going to use Jinja 2 to stamp a report back to your control plane node, letting you know how a run went against all of your individual servers. So you got a bunch of servers that you're hitting, maybe 1,000. And you don't want to just look at the execution at the end of the playbook. You want it to come out to you in a format that shows you what servers were hit, and you want to pull and extract specific information out of it. More than just what you see at the end of a playbook. Because what comes out at the end of a playbook is useful. Useful, like I love to just dump that in and say, okay, I did all my patching for the night or whatever. But this report will give us back, well, you'll see. It'll give us a bunch of information about what was accessible and how it went and everything. So after you complete this testing, you expect to run this against hundreds of nodes and need to know the nodes that it did or didn't complete on. Okay, that's a good thing to expect and understand if we're going to go hit. If I can hit one server, that's cool. If I can hit 2 servers, I can hit 1,000. But then which ones? I hit all the servers, but some of them failed for different reasons. How can I get that information back, right? So we're going to verify our host file. Okay. We're going to create a deploy playbook called root template.yaml to check the uptime of all the servers. That's what we did earlier. Then we're going to create a Jinja 2 template of a report.txt back for the execution of the playbook. Then we're going to report back any unreachable servers and any servers that have been up longer than a day. Now, people might ask, why would I want to know if they've been up longer than a day? Well, one, that's an easy check, so it's easy to show you. And two, when you're patching servers and you expect to reboot them because they're fat, stateful servers and you're rebooting them at the end of a night, well, the only servers you would want to know about at the end of the night, if we patched everything and rebooted it, if we couldn't reach them, that would be a problem. And if they didn't reboot, that would be a different type of problem. Like they didn't take their patches, they didn't reboot, right? So those are the two things I want to know if I'm patching against a bunch of servers. Okay, so I'm going to just copy in my answers because I'm lazy. But then let's go look at what's happening. So we cat our root hosts. We got control plane and node 01. And we're going to go gather the information in kind of a very similar way. Excuse me. We're going to go gather an uptime just like we did in one of our other labs. So there's our uptime. And then we come down to our report out to just the main server. So we run our root template.j2, and then we stamp it to this server, but we give it a specific date time of ISO 8601 basic short. So we're going to stamp a very specific time to it. Okay. And then we're going to say run once, yes, and only on this local host. So we're not going to send this to all the thousands of servers we have. We're just going to do it to the one. Now, we're in a lab with only 2 servers, but again, we can pretend. If we can hit 2 servers, we can hit 1,000. It doesn't matter at that point. Okay. So that's what it's going to do. But before we run it, let's make sure that it is what we expect. So let's say more template.j2. This is much more complex than what we were just dealing with. So in here, I say this is a system validation at date and time. That's the exact same thing we did before. And then now we have a little bit of a control structure here. We say for host in Ansible play host all. Now Ansible play host all is a special variable we just looked at on that Ansible page. And this is all of the hosts that line up at the starting line. And then as they run along the track, some of them fall, some of them twist their ankles, some of them get injured. And at the end, Ansible play hosts, when we're done with the play, Ansible play hosts will have a different set of servers than Ansible play hosts all. If you're running against 1,000 servers, that's almost universally going to be true. I only want you to write the host name down here if they started at the starting line but are not at the finish line. That's what this says. So for host in, and it's going to loop over each host that starts at the starting line. If they're not in the ending block, the people who finished, write their name right there. That's what the logic of that is. Then we come down to hosts who have been up for longer than a day, and we go to everybody that started at the starting line. And we have 2 if conditions. The reason we have 2 if conditions is this. We go to a special variable in Ansible called host vars that maintains every variable for every individual host. And we drop their name in there. So the first time it'll be control plane. And if control plane has the uptime variable defined, that's the uptime variable that was registered from the playbook, then it'll come down here and it'll look for the word day. Day will only ever be in an uptime if a server's been up longer than a day. 57 days. Oops. He's been up for 2 hours and 7. Yeah, he hasn't been up a day. You don't see the word day in there. I don't know who rebooted him, but somebody did. Somebody's been doing admin stuff, and that's good. It means people have been working on stuff in the lab. So he wouldn't have day in there, so his name would show up here if he was one that we were running this against. His name would not, because day was not in there. But the other one where he's been up longer than a day, he would have shown up here and he would have popped up. So like P01 Jumpo 2 in my lab. Now, in our lab, since these servers have been up for like 42 minutes or something, none of these servers are going to have been up longer than a day. And that's fine. We want this list to be empty because we wanted to have rebooted all of our servers. I hope that logic's making sense to people. But anyways, that's the check. Those are the 2 checks that happen right here. Okay? This check saves us from getting a bad Jinja error because it won't even test this on a node, because this variable won't exist if a node didn't get this variable. So that's the check. And uptime standard out, we just look for the word day. Simple little filter. It's just a little search. Okay. Let's run the playbook. It's right here. Just run it. all the nodes did the things they needed to do. And we can just look at the hosts, and we have no unreachable systems. So no servers start at the starting block and weren't reachable for whatever reasons. And no hosts have been up longer than a day. So you say, well, Scott, can you prove? I mean, this is wonderful, but this doesn't prove. Like I like to say, we need to test like this. Maybe this gives us a false confidence that this works, but it's not really doing what it should do. So let's put another server at the starting line that's not actually going to work. There's not going to be the server. So we're just going to come over here, vi root hosts, shift G O node 02, rerun the playbook. There's a node that failed, but we still got the playbook to run. So now we run the report, and earlier, that's the original one up here. Oops, that's the original one up here, right? But now this is the second one, and there is an unreachable system. He didn't come up. He didn't make it. He was in my original list, but then he broke for some reason. So now I tell one of the junior engineers go fix it, and then we continue working on, maybe there's hosts that need to be rebooted, and we start parsing out these nodes to the different people that are going to go fix them, right? If you're doing patching or whatever you're doing. And this is, this is a big part of this report. And then I can run the report again, and the report will just get more and more clean each time. And then when I have the last report and I consider my system good and stable and back up, I say patching is completed. I report that up to my bridge. I get my teams on to validate their parts of patching, and we get done with our late night patching faster than if we didn't do something like this. Right? So this is a way to do things. Is it the only way? No. And we're just stamping a file out. I can make this file go to Discord. Some of you guys have seen, I have, here's an example. Did you guys know that I have, in Discord, we have webhooks. You can do it other ways, but webhooks are pretty fine. And in the sandbox, look, I got 2 servers that are down. They've been down for 3 days now. I need to fix them. But now I know they're there. And if I go fix them right now on stream, and we bring Hammer 1 and Hammer 2 back up, then when this thing goes tomorrow, they'll be back working. We can do that real quick. Here they are. I don't know. I just haven't checked them yet. Why are Hammer 1 and 2 down? Why did somebody turn them off? They're hard down. So let's turn them back up. It's very possible that somebody left them and did like a shutdown -H now, and that would have halted the hardware. Look, no harm in it. They're stateless nodes. It's gonna come up clean every time, right? Let's just boot them and watch them boot. He's booted. He sees that he's Hammer 2. He's booted. He sees that he's Hammer 1, as they will. They're stateless nodes in Werewolf. Which is fine. Somebody probably just didn't know that they're supposed to type reboot. They're going to go to 2-stage bracket, and they're going to boot up. And they're going to start. Yeah, there's no problems here. Yep. Then the lab environment will be fixed, and then I won't have to say, I should have fixed that the other day. I kind of have been snoozing that every morning. I see it every morning, but then I kind of ignore it. But you guys got to remember your root in the environment. If you turn a server off and tell it not to come back up, it's not going to come back up. Right? It's going to, yeah, it's loading. Yeah. No, they're booting up. Okay. So, give one more second here. I just want to see one of them finish. This one should finish first. Get that out of the way. There's some errors because it's older hardware. Not a big deal. Not a big deal to what we're doing on those boxes. We're just doing, whatever system stuff we need. Come on. There we go. Yeah, it got some SE Linux problems. That's fine. So we're not running it. All right, good. It's back up right there. Okay. And if you really wanted to check, you would come here. Hammer 1. Hammer 2. There you go. All right. So the first question here is, how does this lab differ from Unit 7 lab? You might say, well, in both you did Jinja, and I'd say great pattern recognition. You notice two things are similar. But how are they different? Well, in the first one, we stamped each server with the information we wanted. In this one, we ran a whole playbook, and we only stamped it back one time as a report for ourselves, only on this one node. So in the other ones, every server that got touched got a stamp, and they had to use that or bring that with them or do whatever going forward. In this one, we brought the report back to our node, and then we could do whatever we wanted with it from there, right? So that's a major difference. What is the syntax for a variable in Ansible or Jinja? So the syntax for, so let's go. A variable in Ansible is always 2 open curly brackets and 2 closed curly brackets. They can touch the variable name or not. I prefer not having them touch, but some people like them to. In Jinja 2, what is the syntax for control structure? It is an open curly bracket %, and then a %, closed curly bracket. And if you start a for loop, you must end a for loop. If you start an if condition, you must end an if condition. It is like any other syntactical thing that you might run into in your career. You start something, you end it. And yeah, some things like Python, you just start it and then you just leave it open at the end. That's fine. Like there's different control structures, but my point is a fair number of them that are template based are going to be like turning on and off tags. It's very similar. Yeah, that's not what you're doing here, but that's similar. Why might we want a timestamp with an ISO 8601 standard for each report? Well, I like the 8601 basic short like I do, because then all the nodes, all the reports get an individualized number, but it's not as long as the other ones. Like the other ones would continue numbers out to like here. ISO 8601 basic by itself would be, there would be escapable characters that I don't want in a file system. I don't think you should be able to put colons in a file system, but you know, here we are in a world where we can. So I don't want any of those things. So I wouldn't use an ISO 8601 by itself. All right, we check it. It says, look at you learning Ansible templates, you solved the challenge. All right. So, by the way, for anybody that got here later, these all this PowerPoint, all this stuff we've gone through is up in the Discord. So we just got down to lab 8. We just did Jinjas. I said, can you create a file on the control plane node and report out uptime of servers? Yeah, we did that. So now the next one, if we jump to 9, we're going to do some API stuff. API usage in Ansible is very, very powerful. Ansible is a tool like any other. I can show you how to hit an API, and then you could go to me and say, well, I can just use curl. I go, yes, you can. And you can go, I can just use Postman, or I can just use Insomnia. I use Insomnia. I have it on my computer. I love it for things that I need to hit APIs with. But if I'm already, but I posit this, that may be in all those other ways, in curl and all this other stuff. If I needed to build an API call into a tool chain or a pipeline that I already have and I'm already using Ansible, I might tell you that maybe the easiest thing to do is just learn how to pull it with Ansible and then not have to worry about it. That's my thoughts on it. I'm not telling you that's the only way to think about it. I'm just telling you that's the way that I think, maybe, like, I don't know, that's a way to think about it. All right. So let's look at that. Is that still spinning over there? Haven't seen that thing move in a little while. If you guys are wondering, some of those course summaries, those are syllabus for the different courses that we run in Prolog for free. You guys can just come and hang out and do all those different ones. We're working on the automation one now. I'm about halfway done with it, so we're still working on getting that stuff done. We start it back up on January 3rd, so in a few days here, we're going to start up the, we'll be in Unit 10. And I've been cleaning up 6, 7, 8, and 9. getting those all recorded for you guys, and then we'll start Unit 10 on the 3rd and be all caught up and go from there. So then we just have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Did we go 15, 16? Yeah, so we have quite a few left to do, but we'll get around to it. All right, that one's annoying for how small that is. Let me see this real quick. I don't know why that one's so small. There we go. It's a little better. It's the size of the thing that we have. That's a little off. All right, let's go back. So if you guys want to do Lab 9 with me, here it is. Here's Lab 9. So, in this one it says to verify your root host file. And then we're going to root a file called root. Yeah, it looks like I just dropped it right in there. Okay. And the gist of this one is we want to pull some information from an API. There's an API out there in the world somewhere. API internally. We'll do a different lab after this that hits the same thing but with HashiCorp Vault. So we'll pull some information from a server. And we're going to create a playbook that calls from the swappy.dev API people via the URI method. So let's go look. Connection's not private. Hide advanced. May just be HTTP. Is that not going to let us connect either? That's super weird that's not working, but that's fine. We won't worry about it if we can get to it in our browser. We should still be able to get to it here. Let's run the playbook against this Ansible API and see if we can get the call to work. Yep, did. Okay. So let's go look at what that Ansible call, the thing that we're doing. Okay. So we're doing our normal at the beginning of our root API.yaml, and I use YAML. Again, doesn't matter which one you use. And I said call API and get results from a web page. We're using the local host, which is a special inventory where your system just calls from itself. You can set that. I just like to use localhost when I'm doing API calls and when I'm testing things. Gather facts is true, but not really even needed here. And what are we doing? So it says we're going to pull the Swappy, which is the Star Wars API, in case any of you are wondering. I've also had students over the years that have used like the Pokemon one. There's so many APIs out there in the world that you can hit and pull info out of if you want. But we're going to use the URI module. We're going to use the URL HTTPS swappy dev API people. We're going to validate certs false, so we don't care if the certifications are good or not. We're going to return the contents yes, and we're going to register them as a variable. Then we're going to dump the variable to the screen. That's all we're doing. The variable, by the way, we can also get a specific part of the results by looking at swappy.json.results0. But let's go look at the format of our results real quick. So here it is. It's Swappy, Star Wars API. That's the registered name of the variable that we picked. We could have used any variable name we wanted that wasn't a keyword. Okay, so there's our variable. And then we've got some information up here at the top. Don't worry about that. It's all raw. And down here, I have the output as so Star Wars API swappy.json dot. Now there's 82 of these, but we're only going to get the first 10 here. I think it even says up here that it's only the first 10. And then we said in results, we're going to want that 0, which is the first indexable counting number. We just want this guy right here, who happens to be somewhat popular. Some of you guys know who this guy is. His name is Luke Skywalker. He's just some dude. And he is the first one right here in these results. So, swappy.json. Did my thing break? My thing did break. Hold on. Is it back? That's the question. Is it back? Yes, it is back. There's our Ansible playbooks. There's our this. And let's pull up our... There. Boom. Okay. So now, right here, this is the information we're getting. So swappy.json.results 0, which is this first guy, dot birth year or dot eye color would give us blue. So we can filter down through the data to find the specific things that we need from all of these pieces of information that are coming back to us. So let's go look at this variable that's not being shown yet, but swappy.json.results will dig in on just the first one, and then we can get his dot, let's say, eye color that we wanted, right? So let's play with this real quick. Let's VI this file. Shift G. Make sure it's all lined up. Rerun it. Run our Ansible. Pull all that information, get just that little bit of the data that we want out right here. And there's that swappy.json.results 0. And then again, maybe we want eye color. So from this dot eye color, come down here. We say y3y. We say p. And then now we change this to dot eye color. Rerun it. See if it breaks everywhere. See if it works. Does it give us just the eye color for just that one, you know? And or do we just want eye color from a bunch of them? We could do this. This can be all kinds of different things, right? Swap.json.results. We might be able to get away with everything. Sometimes you can get with all the ones that came out. It'll be all the different eye colors. Sometimes it'll break. It just depends. It depends how you call it and stuff. I don't know all the proclivities for how that works, but all right. Anyways, yeah, but you can pull the information out and you can go figure out how to get that other stuff out of it. But question is, what might you use the URI module for with an API? What would you want to pull? Would you want to pull like information about Chevys or Fords or GMCs or whatever? There's APIs all over this planet for all kinds of different things. In fact, there's sites that just keep APIs that are safe for anybody to use. So there's a whole bunch of that out there. What is the hierarchy of data in JSON that you are interested in? It's a hierarchy based on key value pairs. It's all key value pairs and dictionaries, right? So swappy, and then you can call any of these components, but we want swappy.json. And then down in here, we wanted .results, and then that is a list, right, of each of the different users. So the first one is Skywalker, or I could have done swappy. Where's the one that had the total? Maybe I just wanted a count. Content has count. I think we just have count down here too. Swappy.json.count. So I could just do that if I wanted. .count. Just want a count of the total. Can you give me a count? There it is. There's 82 of them total. We only have 10 of them here though because they're in a list, right? And sometimes you can play with the way you do the call to give you more, or sometimes you have to step through and get the other values, right? So that's something that you guys can play with if that's something kind of interesting to you. I don't deal with a lot of that. Like I don't go heavily into that kind of stuff. I just pull all the information I want. Can you get the return number of results from this JSON? Yeah, we had it. It was the count, right? That was that. So can you hit an API any and debug the output? Well, yeah, you could probably find some other API out there and pull the default. I'm going to show you guys a different lab. This lab I'm going to make bigger, and oops, I don't want it that big though. And we're going to do, so you won't have notes on this, but if you were taking notes, which maybe one or two of you are taking notes, you would see this in your, this will go in the same section of APIs. But this is going to be, this is the most complex lab I've built in Killer Coda. So I just need to let everybody know that this one will be a little bit, this one's a little more complex. So we're going to back out. I'll give you guys a link to it for anybody that wants to do it with me. It's under HashiCorp Labs because we're going to use HashiCorp Vault and Ansible. We're still using Ansible, but Ansible to read secrets. All right, so this one is one of the more complex labs. Actually, it's probably the most complex lab I have. So it's free. It's on Killer Coda. And it says, examine this workflow about the task that we're about to complete. So we'll open that in a new tab. So boom, now we got this big workflow. We'll look at that in a second. Your team has determined they need Vault to test their dev environment. HashiCorp Vault has been installed on the server. Okay. Start the server in dev mode. Okay. Export the required values to your shell and verify that the server is running. So that's the first step. Is we got to do some Vault stuff. This is setup stuff that will help us to understand this. So now HashiCorp Vault is sitting over here. HashiCorp Vault is we're gonna create a secret. We're gonna pretend that we're just some team, and we create a secret. We're gonna enable user pass authentication, also not really part of what we're doing. And then we're gonna create a user. It's also not really important to what we're doing. And in there, we're going to create a secret that they can put in. So some dev team can put in like a database string. In this case, they're gonna put a username and a password in there. That username and password could also include a database string. It can do all kinds of things. Then we're going to use Ansible, and we're going to send in a username and password and get back a token from them, from the user pass authentication. So we're going to log in, pull some token. Then we're going to use that token to read that secret that was put in there by that dev team and pull it back. And then we have that variable. Like I said, Ansible puts a variable in the stack. You could use that variable for the rest of your playbook to deploy the communication between your your front end app and your back end database or whatever. But you can put your database string in there. I really should just tie this into my 3-tier app deployment and show you guys how it all works together. I've just never done that. Remember, you only got an hour for free in the Killer Coda labs, so the longer we make labs and the more complex, the less chance people have of finishing them. But let's go ahead and come back over here. The environment's set up. And it says right here, if you want to go spend more time with HashiCorp and their lab, their server, you can. But we're going to start the Vault server in the background. So hit enter, it's in the background. And we're going to export 2 variables. So the first variable is on the local machine, port 8200 is running Vault. Now I know that, well, because I just started it, but also if I look for that, I can see 8200 running. Also, I think there's another port running. 8200 and 8201 are the 2 ports that are running. Cool. We can hit the server. We see that our system is listening anyways. Let me see if... Make sure nobody's texting me or anything. Sorry, guys. Okay. This other part is I got to export the Vault token so that my system knows that it is the root user. I was only given this Vault token right here as we first set up this server. I get this root token. Only when we first set this up do I get this. And it's because it's a dev server, so let's paste that in there. And now my server can connect and do like a Vault status and see that the Vault is there and it's unsealed, meaning we can write data and pull data out of it. If it's sealed, you have to unseal it, and we can't do that right now because we're just in a dev vault. So dev vaults always come up unsealed. They only store data in memory, so you don't want to use a dev vault to store any real data. Okay, so we've got Vault running. Okay, we've got some information in here. This is good, and we can validate that it's listening and it's on and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, so now we're going to go to the second part, and now that we have Vault running, so we've got this outside piece Vault, We're going to create a secret. We're going to set all this stuff up. Okay? Here's somebody walking around outside. I wonder if my wife's home. Give me 1 second real quick, guys. 1 second here real quick. I think that's my wife. So I have my window open because it's really nice outside, guys. I think my wife's wandering around out there. Give me a second. I'm going to yell at her and scare her. She likes being scared. 1 second. Hey, what are you doing with those trash cans? Those are my trash cans. What are you doing down there? I told the guys I was going to scare you. She said she was scared. All right, that's my wife. She's downstairs. All right, let me turn my camera back on. I just wanted to scare her real quick. All right. Yeah, she was scared. She can't see me from up here, but I could hear her down there. All right, so we got Vault running. A lot of this stuff is kind of set up for the joke. It's like set up for a punchline. We want to do the Ansible part, but we got to set all this other stuff up to get Ansible working. So let's go in. We're going to do some Vault stuff, and we're just going to see that there's some key value stuff. That's not really germane to what we're talking about. But we can see that we can put in, as some other team, we can generate and put in this secret apps value with a username, secret user, and password super secure. Now that's in the path for the key value pair of secret app1 values. Now we're going to check that out. We're going to get the permissions to check that out as the Ansible user. That's what we're going to go. So now I can get that key vault, but I'm also the root user here, so I'm using root permissions to see this. Okay. So you've got Vault running and you've created a secret. Now you need to create a programmatic access to get to that secret, and we're going to do that with a username and password. We need to enable, so when Vault comes up, especially in dev mode, it doesn't have all kinds of things turned on for it. It doesn't have any AWS stuff. It doesn't have the ability to log in as a username and a password. So we're going to turn that on. Then we're going to make a user. So we're going to turn that on. So that's on. We're going to create a user for Ansible, and he's going to have a password of Ansible1234, shift34, right? And then we're going to make a policy for him, and this policy is super simple. Look, it's root ansible-policy.hcl, and the Ansible user, well, we're going to tie it to the Ansible user here in a second, but this policy that we wrote is going to give the path secret capabilities create, read, update, and delete, the CRUD values, and then list and patch because it's a key vault version 2. Don't worry about that. And we're going to give that policy into the system. We're going to write that into the system. And then we're going to write that and give that permission to the Ansible user. And then we're going to look at the Ansible user and see that he has the Ansible policy. That's a lot. I don't expect anybody to get that watching me right now. But if you want to go get into Ansible Vault, this is an Ansible Vault, this HashiCorp Vault, you can go play with that. I was Vault certified for a while there, but I didn't really maintain it. It's a pretty simple tool when you get into there. Let me not call it simple. Let me say it's straightforward. And if you spend time with it, you'll get it. All right, so we check it. Everything Vault's set up. Now you have to use Ansible to pull the information. So now we're back on the Ansible side of thing. All that other stuff was just like us playing around and getting this part ready like we were in a real company. It's a lot of times we do stuff like that. We pretend that our lab is like a real company, so then we have to set it up. But then what's really the point of this is we're going to make Ansible go grab that info. Look, everything Vault's set up. Now you have to use Ansible to pull the information. Since we cannot leave our passwords in Ansible out in the open, we're going to make an Ansible Vault. So now we're making another Vault that's not a HashiCorp Vault. So Ansible Vault, HashiCorp Vault, different. And let's do the solution here. We'll install Ansible on our box. It'll take a second. And we're going to create an Ansible playbook that can authenticate to Vault. Look, it's going to go read. It's going to send some information over. And then and we'll get this to run real quick. So as soon as it's done, we're going to read. We're going to secret read. The more we play with these labs, the longer I see it take, like to do stuff. So Just wonder if it's like I'm hitting like a bandwidth limit. Because like Ansible should take like 3 seconds to install. Sometimes it only takes like 5 seconds to install. But then sometimes it's like 5 minutes. All right, wasn't that bad. vi root secret read.yaml. Right? And in here, we're going to drop this stuff. Let's look at what this is doing. We're going to name, arbitrary name of the playbook is to read variables. We're going to use localhost. And we're going to call the URI module, and we're going to hit that local host. Now we saw that earlier. That's 127.0.0.1 We verified that's ourselves, and we're connecting into our vault. But now we're using this different path. Let's quit real quick. We'll just write it real quick. And then we go up here, and then now, what's that full path? v1 auth user pass for login, and we're going to give the variable Ansible right there. So the variable Ansible will be dropped in there. If you had a different username, you could do a different user. Return content yes. Method is going to be post. Body format is JSON, and the JSON is going to be password is equal to the password we hand in. So we're going to hand in the password. Then the variables and stuff that we get back, we're going to register as user connect, and we're going to debug them to the screen. That's all we're doing in this part. Like nothing up my sleeve. Just it's going to work. Escape :Q because we already saved it. And we go down here, and we're going to run that playbook with the username given at the command line of Ansible. So look, the username is Ansible. The password is that Ansible password 1234. And it's going to go read and give me back the user connect string. And what I really care about is the tasty data that I want is JSON auth client token. This client token, I can run around and give to Vault, and it will give me information if assigned to the user of this token, which is Ansible _ user, right? The Ansible user. He has the create, read, update, delete, list, and patch permissions against the path that we're going to call, right? Because you just saw me do that that was what we did in the lab. All right. So, but we don't want to store that out in the open. We don't want to leave that. So we're just going to make a new Vault real quick, and we're going to give it Ansible. Oh my gosh. Ansible. If I could type 1234. 1234. And then in here, we're going to give those two values that we want to use inside of our Ansible playbook. Instead of giving them at the command line, we're going to give them by reading them from the vault. That's all we're doing. And now we're going to update our playbook a little bit to be able to read. So right here, we're going to add a line that says vars files. So we get variables from inside of a file. And one of the files we're going to use is root vault.yaml, right? And then now when we run our playbook doesn't need, I don't have to type anything anymore. And I need the vault password. Actually, I do need the vault password, which was Ansible 1234 to be able to decrypt the secrets. And now, boom, I got my token. There's my token right there. JSON.auth.client token. Okay. We did the first part. Now we need to use that token to feed back up to so we checked in. Basically, we checked in and said, hey, I'm Scott. Here I can prove I'm Scott, or I'm the Ansible user. Give me a token. Now I've got that token. Now I'm going to give that token back right here to, so I'm going to Shift G O, and right here I'm going to read the secret now. Right, everything's lined up. We're going to read the secret now. That secret data app1.value or /values, right? So we're going to go read that, and there's this special connect string. We have to give this in our headers x vault token, and we're going to give it userconnect.json.auth.client token. So that's that client token that I said was like that tasty data we want, or that little token that the kid can use. If anybody wonders where I get that from, there's an old thing called the Kerberos Carnival, and that's how they explain Kerberos if you ever go study for your CISSP. And I think that's kind of an excellent way to think about it. And some people call it like vending machine permissions, but it's all just OAuth token. It's an OAuth token. That's what that is. But anyways, OAuth 2, if anybody cares. All right, let's save that. And when it's done, it's going to dump those credentials to the screen. Would we normally show those credentials to the screen? Absolutely not. But could we then use them? Because as with all things, once I can debug something, once I have it in my system, in my pipeline, I can do whatever I want with it, right? So I come down here, I'm going to rerun the playbook. I need the password again, which is Ansible 1234. It's going to run, and now we're going to see that decrypted data pulled down right here. JSON. So this is now secret underscore creds dot JSON dot data dot data dot password and username. So if I want to go pull that and show each one of those individually, I hit O right here, and I add these two values. Right? And now I can get just the username and just the data. Oh, whoops. Well, it would help if I do the right password. Now it's going to go through, and we're just going to see those last two. Again, would you ever decrypt those and show those to the screen? Absolutely not. But now, it's like I tell people, once Ansible has it in SAC, Ansible can do whatever it wants with it. And we can do whatever we want with it. And it could be part of a deploy, and it can be part of some of in our automation work, we were deploying things up into, oh shoot, we could turn them into secrets, and then we could read the secrets into Kubernetes. We could do, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you guys how to like make the biscuits. I'm just showing you guys all the tools. You guys can do it however you want. Like, I'm not going to dictate like you have to do it this certain way. I'm just showing you guys the way that you get the data from one place to another securely, right? Yeah, that needs to be part of a bigger lab one of these days. But again, we'll get to that. All right. Well, the wife's home, so I need to go check on and see what she's doing. And also, we have well, I guess we have a few hours till the party. But the automation labs are coming along. I just have to finish up and fix up 6 and 7, which I'll plan on getting those done tomorrow, and then getting the presentation. I'm going to try to record some of the presentations tomorrow for these. We've done the meetings together. We've already had these, so some of you guys that know about how you can go and see that, it's over on the YouTube side. We have units 1 through 5 of the automation course recorded. We've met for 6, 7, 8, 9. I just haven't recorded them yet. So I'll get these, and these labs are done here. 6 and 7 are the only 2 I got to clean up. And then I just need to do this. But yeah, we do deployments with Kubernetes. And again, we could add in some of these things as created secrets, and then we could delete the secrets when we're done with them. There's all kinds of things that we can kind of do here. So, but automation course is moving along. I'm probably going to be just about done here then. How's that little sand art doing? That sand art looks like it's doing pretty good. I haven't really been paying attention to that the whole stream, but I'm sure some of you have been mesmerized by it. Let me do something. I know the thing's been showing you guys the Discord, but let me invite some of you guys to Discord if you haven't been there. You're welcome to. I think we're at like, I've lost track, guys, but I think we're at like 4,500 almost. We're getting close. So the goal is just like, you know, getting people doing Linux, right? If you want to, if you're, I mean, I don't want to be one of those guys that's like, hey, you need to do stuff for the new year, but I'm going to tell you, like, if your goal for the new year is like find new work, you could get into Linux. I think Linux is a good place to jump off and get into. I'm not telling you have to, but some of you like to do this stuff for fun. So if you do it for fun, maybe you want to do it for profit. Nick Hill, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful. Yeah, I'm just probably wrapping it up here a little bit. I was gonna keep going, and I'm just like, I got a lot of work to do too. So not work, but like cleaning up the labs and stuff and getting some of this other stuff going. One of the things we're doing, we've decided. The guys have decided for me. Let's actually go see what they've decided, because I haven't looked at this in a while. Up in general, and who knows what else is going on in general, we have I got to go back to where we have the discussion on it. I think it's right up here. I don't even know what other people are talking about, so I'm not even going to worry about that. I had told everybody in the Discord that they could vote on what we do with the Linux admin course, because everybody always wants to start the Linux admin course. Not a lot of people finish it because it is a challenge, guys. But one of the things we were talking about, I think it's right here. Ah, here it is. Let's go back up here. Let's go see how the voting's going. I haven't looked at this in a while. It looks like most people have voted for the normal schedule, so they want to run it over 16 weeks, and that's fine, I guess. That's just, that's going to be a lot for people. I had given the option to go with 4 or 6 weeks, and I kind of thought that because some people voted for 4 and 6, that I might think that the fairest thing to do would be to split the difference and maybe go with like an 8-week version, because more people technically have gone for a shorter, shorter 4 to 6. 4 to 6 weeks is shorter, and more people have voted for that than simply just the normal schedule. However, if we went just on the options, the normal schedule is the one that people seem to want the most. So I might split that and just go with like 8 weeks and just do 2 a week. I think that might be the most fair for people. Nick Hill said, what's my take on platform engineer role for new graduates? I mean, I'm a platform engineer. That's what I've been doing for probably my whole career. That's probably the closest to my actual title for most, because I'm a high performance compute guy, I'm a network guy, I'm a storage guy, I'm a Linux guy, but high performance compute is my actual title, like high performance compute engineer. But even with that, platform engineer is the most close to what I actually do. So the question over here was, what's my take on that role? I think it's a great role. I think the number one thing to do to be a good platform engineer is to figure out how to reliably and repeatably build the same thing over and over again with minor differences. It's almost like, you guys ever seen like somebody like they play the drums and they go like boom, 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 and then like every sixth one they go tss, boom, 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 tss, boom. I don't know, whatever. Like, I'm not a drummer, but and then they do that for a while, and then some people will even record this with like a synthesizer, and then they'll add in another sound. And they'll be like, that's kind of cool, like strong bad, like the system is down. But anyways, my point in saying that is, for systems, for platform engineering, it's like, can I build the same server over and over again? Yes. Okay, cool. Scott can do that. Scott's good at that. I'm actually, that's what people look at me for, is to build servers. Now, hold on. Now we need this one base image, but we also need a base image that's specific to the login nodes. And that is going to be FIPS compliant, and also it's got to be able to handle SE Linux. The base image for the compute, like for the whole environment, doesn't need that, but this one does. I say, okay, now I've got these two, doom, 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 right? Like I'm doing a drum beat, and then it's like, okay, now also in the FIPS compliant nodes, like from that one, maybe we can spawn off. So that's a login node. We also need like a data transfer node and a web application firewall node and maybe some other nodes. So now we've got 4 different types of nodes over here that are more secure, but I've still got my base node over here, right? And at any given time, I could rebuild the base node. And at any given time for each of these nodes within their names and their specifications, I can also deploy a node. All right, it's like a drum beat. And then from here they go, okay, there's a less secure type of node called like a compute node, but we need it to be like as lean as possible. From this original image, strip out all of this other crap that we don't need for compute nodes, because compute nodes need to be lean and fast and just connect to our high performance like they just need to be up, and they need to get into our back-end InfiniBand network, and so they need those drivers still and this kind of stuff. And then so now for my base image and then my 4 over here, now I have this. But at any given time, could I deploy any one of them over again because of a new requirement from the root one? Yes, just like that. And if you get good at that kind of stuff, then I mean, like the career, I think the platform engineering career is pretty easy, because that's kind of the role I've fallen into. Do I still troubleshoot stuff? Absolutely. Do I still build other things and work on other things if people need? Sure. But like Scott, like me as a person, especially within my company, I mainly build images and then harden them and secure them according to STIG standards and CIS benchmarks and all these other things, which I just have Ansible playbooks that I use to build those, and then I customize them for each individual build. There was even a discussion on our server earlier, somewhere in our Discord, somebody was making the discussion about, it might have even been in security, I don't remember, but like how would you harden a box? And for me, it's you build a server, you noodle on basically one of the STIG standards until you get a build complete, and then that one becomes your deployment for that build. That one never changes, and then for each of those other ones you modify from the original, and then you kind of go from there. But it all has to be automated. You all have to be able to rerun your playbooks and your modifications over and over again. So you voted for 6 weeks. Let me see if I still... Might go back over here if I'm still there. I should still be up there. Oh no, I went too far down. Can I find it? Should be right. It was right here. It was my. It was right up here. And it was my. There we go. So yeah, so now they're now they're even. Maybe I'll relink it and say let's get some last votes in here. But yeah, what are we up to? Hold on, did you guys know we could do this? Some of you guys don't know we can do this. User count 4487. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. We're moving up. Again, you know, we don't charge for anything in the server. Server's all free. All the stuff we do inside the server is free. In fact, the only thing people can find around here that's paid for is the book. So people want the big book of labs. And all the labs are free. So the labs are just... That gives you more color around some of the stuff we were doing today. Specifically the Linux and the Ansible labs. Hey, how's it going? Man, it's been a long time since I've seen that Haas name. How's it going? That's you're one of our Germans, I believe. But it's been a while. Yeah, we were doing Ansible. We did up through lab 9, and then we did a separate lab. But maybe we'll come back. Maybe if I got some time tomorrow around the other stuff, because I really want to get this other stuff done tomorrow. The stuff that I have to do. Maybe we can, if I can get back on stream, we'll start on lab 10. We'll start on lab 10, which is the Ansible Vault, and we'll push forward and we'll push fax servers and modify packages and do the rest of our labs. Maybe we can hit the balance of labs tomorrow. Schedule's late night for me. Yeah, and you know what's funny? Like I was telling the guys the other day, even like if you stream, if you're serious about streaming, you really should be on like, you know, every day, same time and this. And then I was like, but I don't really do that. I just kind of pop on whenever. I figure people that really want to watch this stuff will probably catch it over on YouTube later anyways. So let me go pop over to my little end of stream thing. I need to do one thing though here before I do that. I need to copy this and go to our little end of stream thing. And we do need to put this over here, right? So when we're doing our little end of stream thing, you guys can still watch the little thing draw if you want. All right. I'll probably get out of here then, but I appreciate everybody coming by. You guys are definitely welcome to hang out in the Discord, and there's a lot more persistence down there around whatever we're doing. I think this is some kind of star. I don't ever know what these patterns are. The wife has a little app that she can put them in there. So, but I appreciate people coming by, and I will see